those positions are drawn. We had 20 workers yesterday. It was absolute mayhem here at Churchill Downs and across the country for that matter. Today, just a couple. Midnight Bisou for the DISTAFF and Yoshida for the Breeders' Cup Classic. Those are the morning workout horses for today, Monday. And let's take a look at Midnight Bisou. This was just a moment ago, Caton, and no surprises here. She goes 4 furlongs and 49 seconds flat. We were trying to predict if it was going to be 49 flat or 49 and 4 when we were talking about Steve Asmussen yesterday with her.
Exactly. I mean, they're all kind of 50, 49 and change, somewhere in that range. You can see that she would probably be going off a little bit faster if her rider let her. He's got a lot of space between his body and the saddle, and that tells you that he hasn't really settled in to allow her to do very much at this point, but her ears are pricked. She's got nice contact with the reins. They're not super short, but at the same time, she's allowed to kind of stretch her neck out a bit and really very workmanlike, very typical of all Steve's workers. Midnight Bisou's head cocked just a little bit to the outside, but I think that, again, is more the rider aboard her controlling her without interfering with her stride or anything else. It's sort of a signal if he kind of snugs that outside rein just a little bit more than the inside to keep her straight and also to get that lead change that you wanted. She did switch over to the inside lead right at the wire. Joe, a lot of horses will do that, both in races and in the morning workout. Sometimes they're just reacting to everything that's positioned right at the finish line. Sometimes they're getting just a little bit tired, or they realize a lot of smart horses or horses who've run a lot know exactly where the wire is, so they give everything they have in those last couple of jumps, and then they just switch over again. It gives them just a little break. She did switch. She's on her correct lead. She did everything like clockwork. I think everybody should be very pleased with that work.
Yeah, nice easy gallop out there as well for Midnight Bisou for trainer Steve Asmussen. A lot of arrivals in the last couple of days, Caton. Still a few more over the next couple of days or so, including Bob Baffert's brigade coming in tomorrow, Tuesday. But a couple of California stars recently arrived, and they got their first look at the racetrack this morning. And they happen to be both trained by John Sadler, and they happen to both be the favorites in their respective races, talking about Accelerate and Catalina Cruiser, looking very forward to their first appearances. I believe they both worked this past Saturday for Sadler and have followed a perfect plan up until this point.
Accelerate's 9 for 21 lifetime with earnings of $2.4 million. He had his heavy-duty workout on Saturday and then shipped. This is the first day on the track here at Churchill Downs for Accelerate. So he's doing a little bit of light jogging. I don't know if he actually turns around and gallops or if he just maintains this little light workout, which is probably more likely. It gives him a chance to see everything at a more controlled pace. He's toward the outside fence, not going to be in anybody's way. I suspect this guy is a pro, but he hasn't traveled that much outside of California. Occasionally, he did run in the Oakland Handicap and was beaten just a neck in the spring. But for the most part, he's a California boy. And boy, how consistent he has been. 5 wins from 6 starts this year, earnings of over $1 million, capped off with his win in the Awesome again at 1.25 miles. But he was even more impressive in the Pacific Classic at the 1.25 mile distance of the Breeders' Cup Classic. And as he reaches out his neck a little bit, kind of tugging a bit, that's a wonderful sign that he's working the bit in his mouth and that he is kind of eager and forward in terms of this jog. He's very loose. He's very free. Jogging is sometimes more tenuous and tougher on the body than the actual galloping, because galloping they can just kind of rock back and forth, whereas jogging they really have to use all their muscles and really stride out. Their feet have to hit the ground even a little bit more squarely, a little bit more surface making contact with the racetrack than sometimes would be the case at a gallop. So a lot of times you see how a horse is traveling and how they're handling things better at the jog than you do at the gallop.
Interesting that John Sadler worked him 7 furlongs Saturday. He said that he was a little bit concerned about the weather and that he wouldn't be able to put as strong a gallops into Accelerate as he had hoped for. So kind of a preemptive strike by Sadler, working him that distance. This is the likely favorite for the Breeders' Cup Classic. Caton just gave us Accelerate's tremendous resume. Another horse with a tremendous resume who we may see in the Breeders' Cup Classic next year is his stablemate, and that is Catalina Cruiser. And this is a horse who was undefeated, Caton, and he's the likely favorite for the Dirt Mile.
Ronna's Racing's Catalina Cruiser is perfect, 4 for 4, and I'm excited to see him in the flesh. Talk about a horse who quickly went to the big stage, broke his maiden at Santa Anita in October, came back off the shelf to win an allowance race, and then again went to the sidelines back in July. He won the San Diego Handicap and the Pat O'Brien back-to-back, and now comes in off of freshening again. You can see he's a fresh horse, but boy, is he fit. He's toned. He looks razor sharp to me. He would love to be able to turn around and do a little something rather than just jog right now. Kind of tossing his head a little bit, giving his rider a little bit of sass there because perhaps the cooler air as well for these California horses is a refreshing change. And fortunately, Joe, they all handle it better than most of the humans, myself included.
Yeah, it's a little warmer this morning. It warmed up considerably in Louisville yesterday. We had a heavy southerly wind come through here that warmed up the temperatures. It's going to be warmer today and tomorrow as well. And then it looks like mid-50s, but improving weather forecast for Friday and Saturday Breeders' Cup days at Churchill Downs. We've seen a couple of the American stars and Accelerate and Catalina Cruiser on the track this morning. The international stars are going to grace us with their presence as well. And for more on that, here's Gabby Gaudet. Gabby?
Joe, thank you so much. I think I speak for everybody, the excitement that is ensuing here for the Europeans to finally make their way onto the track for the first day. Now, I did get the chance to go back to the quarantine barn and just the process. So I want to talk about the process. So you have to get approval. You have to get a card. Then you go back there, which is in the far corner of the backstretch here at Churchill Downs. You have to get approved by security who's standing outside the gates. It's completely gated, just a few barns behind that gate that kind of rounds the circumference of it. So then once you finally go through that process, you have to dip your feet in like a sanitized liquid there. And then after that, you can finally tour kind of the area in the quarantine barn. And I did finally get through there, and I did finally get to see Enable and Roaring Lion peeking their heads out of the stall here this morning. So it was very exciting. They are set to hit the track later this morning at 7:30, both of them, Enable and Roaring Lion, along with a couple of other John Gosden shippers. There's going to be a boatload of European horses taking to the track today between 7:30 on the dirt and all the way to 9:45 on the turf. So we'll be looking forward to that. Really excited about that. Now, some disappointing news. We just heard yesterday that XY Jet will not be making his way into the starting gate for the Breeders' Cup Dirt Sprint. His trainer, Jorge Navarro, saying that he did not come out of his work well. He's a horse that he actually reportedly, Jorge Navarro did say that he did witness some swelling in the knee that has had multiple surgeries in the past. So they're taking the right approach, very cautious with this horse, and opting to not run him in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Sprint. But as you guys mentioned at the top of the show, the Breeders' Cup post position draw is going to be happening at 4 p.m. later today. We also have a lot of shippers. We're going to get the majority of horses from New York today. They will be on 2 flights between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. a touchdown here in Louisville. Horses that are on those flights include the Todd Pletcher horses, the Chad Brown horses, and Shug McGahee horses, along with many others. So just so everybody knows, the horses have to be here Tuesday at the latest for Friday, so all of the juveniles, and Wednesday at the latest for Saturday. So just a couple more days, guys, and everybody will be here and ready to go for the Breeders' Cup.
Thanks, Gabby. And XY Jet's defection from the Twin Spires Sprint, Caton, takes a lot of the steam out of the race, which helps a horse like Promises Fulfilled, who expects to go to the lead. Mind Your Biscuits has speed as well. But that was a major speed player at XY Jet, and XY Jet, who no longer is going to participate.
Yeah, to be sure. I think people were looking at a scorching hot pace. Maybe now it's just sizzling. Would that be, it's just a little bit, but not a lot. And connections with horses like Limousine Liberal, I'm sure are going to miss the presence of a speed factor like that could set little bit better for a horse that comes off the pace. Mind Your Biscuit's kind of in that camp had he been in the sprint.
Right.
But now that he's in the Classic, that changed things for him. Every time you look at these, you think it's got a lot of speed, it's got a little speed. But the truth is, off the break, it's surprising how many times you see it differently than you envisioned. And one horse alone on the lead, or horses that you didn't imagine showing speed, getting energized by whether it's the crowd or the experience, the excitement, or maybe they just are trying to rise to the occasion. But I often find the sprint pace a little different in reality than what it appeared on paper.
Yeah, and that definitely transfers over to the other sprints on the grass as well. There you see the pre-entries for the Twin Spires Turf Sprint. Again, entries will be drawn at 4 p.m. today for all of the Breeders' Cup races. Let's take a look at a couple of more California Invaders. This is Pavel. This horse is definitely familiar with the surroundings here at Churchill Downs. He won the Stephen Foster Handicap, a win and you're in race earlier this summer. It was a breakthrough performance for him, but he's been watching Accelerate's heels in Southern California. He does have the advantage, though, Caton, of having been here to Churchill Downs, having proven that he likes this racetrack, and, of course, Doug O'Neill, a two-time Kentucky Derby winning trainer.
He hasn't gotten past Accelerate, but when Accelerate's not in the race, he's been very, very good. In the Stephen Foster, he looked like a good thing and won at a very generous price, almost 7-1 odds. And that, to me, is significant in that he demonstrated that he liked the track. I think that's one of the big selling points for Doug O'Neill, the location of the Breeders' Cup this year that might have clinched the deal, but he has, by all rights, earned his way into the race as well with his performance in the Pacific Classic and other races. Really, if you look down his running lines, you find only one real blip in the Breeders' Cup Classic last year at Del Mar, where he really didn't get on track. But other than that, he's been very consistent. He might not win as much, but he always runs and makes a good count of himself.
I remember him this time last year when he was up-and-coming 3-year-old, and he realized some of that potential in the Stephen Foster, and definitely a horse that can make an impact on the Classic. Here's Mopatism. Now, Caton, this is a horse who has been chasing some of the better females around the racetrack during the course of her career. She's been cross-entered in the DISTAFF and also the Filly and Mare Sprint. And no matter what race she winds up in, she's going to really need to step up her game in order to be a factor.
Mopatism wasn't at her best in the Delaware Handicap, which was her most recent start back in July. But Doug O'Neill is giving her some time, freshening her, and she has run some huge races off the shelf. Joe, I think that in and of itself is something to consider when looking at her. Basically, it's a question if you think she's good enough to beat the best fillies and mares, Abel Tasman and Monomoy Girl, and Midnight Bisou and others. But I do think she's probably going to sit on one of her best races. Even though she was a little off form prior to the layoff, she always seems to come back with a really strong effort when she's given some time.
Doug O'Neill does have 5 Breeders' Cup wins on his resume as well. We just got to look at Pavel and also Mopatism. And we have Clocker Brandon Staubel joining us here on the show. And Brandon's got some information about what he's seen the last several mornings. Brandon, it was really, really, really busy yesterday at Churchill Downs with a lot of trainers rerouting their works from Saturday to Sunday when the racetrack was in a lot better shape. One of the workouts that you want to talk about, and of course welcome, is City of Light. And it's still, a question whether or not he's going to go in the mile or the Classic, maybe tilting a little bit towards the mile. Welcome.
Yeah, appreciate it. Blame Bill Mott for me coming over a little later. I think he had a few workers to work at the end there. Like he's got another important horse to work later, I think, in Yoshida. So I was a little late getting over, but glad to be here. And, City of Light yesterday, one work I wanted to just touch on briefly. Looked really good, I thought. Kind of a bigger horse you can see on the screen here. Size-wise, either race, Classic Dirt Mile, wouldn't bother me. Just thought that this horse was getting over the ground really well. I like the fact that, talked about this before. I just like the fact that a horse coming into the race usually has a really strong push from behind, and that's what I saw from City of Light. So, we'll just touch briefly on this work. You can see the ears are up. They're flopping going into the pole here, and rider just taking it easy early on, and City of Light impressed me in the gallops too, leading up to the work. I mean, that's one thing that I also look at. I'm not just out there clicking the watch only for the works and then sitting back with the feet up and just drinking the coffee. I'm watching the gallops too. Those are very important, especially how they come out of the race. City of Light was actually on track this morning, just a little jog, and looked well out of the work so far. So you can see at the quarter pole that right ear just flicking like, what do you want me to do? I'll do what you want me to do. A little bit of nudging from the jock here. Switch leads good. And then down the lane, ears are up still. They're kind of flopping, just like, okay, if you want me to go, I'll go. Really, I thought picked it up here a little bit, and I really liked the push from behind, strong push from behind, getting over the surface well. Some of these horses that have never been over the Churchill Downs track, I want to make sure they're getting over the surface well. You can see the rider's hands never move there, and strong gallop out past the wire there. I thought it was a really nice work from City of Light.
Brandon, what did you make of him working so far off the rail? Around the turn, it seemed that he was a little bit farther off the rail than most of the horses that we've seen breezing.
Yeah, I think trainers will do that. They'll keep them off the rail so they don't go too fast, and just something easy, and then just not to get the horse too much into the work, not to get a fast time. You see guys like Bob Baffert, Steve Asmussen, they'll do that a lot. They'll pull their horses off of the rail and just try to keep them nice and relaxed.
47-3, and when it looks like they're going 49,
yeah,
that makes it that much more impressive.
Yeah, no, very impressive work in there, and like I said, it's just about the strong push from behind that I like. Bigger horse. I kind of think the dirt mile's more of a better fit there, but I wouldn't be shocked if they take a chance in the Classic either.
Now, social media is great, isn't it? I mean, so many mixed reviews that I've seen on Twitter about Monomoy Girl's workout, and interested to hear what camp you're in.
Yeah, no, I think she, it was, for me, it reminded me of the drill before the Oaks, and just something easy. I believe Brad Cox talked about they didn't intend for her to break two back of the mate, but they did, and the mate was very headstrong and on the bit, so Monomoy Girl they didn't want to do too much. I mean, that's very easy to see 6 days before a big-time race. I mean, you're not looking to do a whole lot in there. Giroux's just got a nice hold, and Monomoy always runs a bit high-headed. I mean, she's not a runoff or anything like that. She just carries her head just a tad high, but you can see here, picks up Dazzling Jim, I believe, on the inside, and Florent's just going easy down the lane. He's got the hands there, and he never really moves. And same thing you just talked about, Caton, kind of took her out wide just to kind of keep her from doing too much, engages the mate there, and I think at any point if he just kind of niggles on her, she's going to go past, but he doesn't want to do that. He's just kind of squeezing her right now, and she's right there. I wasn't concerned that Dazzling Jim's going to have a head in front. It doesn't bother me. That's not the intent of the drill. It's not, anything like that. It's all about just squeezing her, letting her know that, hey, I've got a mate. It's what I like to call a competitive team drill. Just something to keep her interested. If she goes out there and works solo, maybe she doesn't get as much out of it. And you can see around the turn here, he maybe lets her out just a tad, but, I mean, they're not looking to do too much. Look at the flesh and look at the power from the hind end on Monomoy Girl. I mean, she looks great. She's galloped great, and I believe yesterday I touched on her last two works have been fantastic. I think the 59 work I had last quarter in 22 and change. I mean, she was flying home. So this is more strictly a maintenance move, just something to keep her happy, keep her interested, and just to get a little something out of it.
And Brandon, one thing about her, if you had asked her, if Florent had asked her, do you feel like she would have been able to get past her workmate?
Without a doubt. Yeah, I mean, all he had to do was just squeeze her, maybe flag the stick a little bit. But like I said, it wasn't the intent. But there's not a doubt in my mind if he would have asked her to go past, she would have increased the, 5-6 length lead.
We got some news yesterday. Gabriel Gaudet reporting today some swelling in the knee of XY Jet. He is out. That takes a lot of the steam out of the Twin Spires Breeders' Cup Sprint, which could benefit a horse like Promises Fulfilled, who worked yesterday. Yeah,
I thought it was an interesting move from Promises Fulfilled. The work two back, I thought was really good. I was really impressed there. And I'll tell you what, after the break when Dale worked his horses, in my opinion, there wasn't as much moisture in the ground as there was later. So I thought the track was just a tad loose. nobody's fault there, just a tad loose. Dale worked a bunch of horses after the break, and I thought they all kind of handled it the same way. It was kind of maybe just sliding out from them just a little bit. Something I'll note in my notes, but Promises Fulfilled into the bid here. You can see that Ryder's got the hands low, and the thing about this move is I liked it, but it didn't wow me. And so I think if you're looking at the sprint and a horse like Imperial Hint or some other ones that are going to be in there, I think it may be a race you want to spread a little bit. I thought Promises Fulfilled was okay, but he didn't wow me here. And you can see the rider kind of urging a little bit there. Now the ears are up, and there's a decent stride down the lane, but a little more ask than I'm used to seeing with Promises Fulfilled. And the time, when you look at it, 48 and change, you can see right here he's still kind of nudging on Promises Fulfilled to pick it up, and then he kind of really gets after him on the gallop out. I thought it was an okay move. When I grade my works, I used the letter scale. I would have given it a B-. I thought it was just okay. You can still see he's urging pretty good here on the turn, and I'll just say I think I've seen Promises Fulfilled a little better. Wasn't bad, but it didn't wow me.
And that's kind of the importance. It's relative to what you've seen in the past, right?
Right, exactly. And, just like the guys from California that'll come here and me being here in Kentucky, we've seen these horses, some of them for years, 2 or 3 years. So we compare them to other drills. And like I said, and you have to take several things into factor there. The horse racing's a game of circumstances. We know that. Same thing with the workouts in the morning. I said the track I thought was a little loose, so maybe Promises Fulfilled wasn't handling it. Maybe we're going to get a different track on the race day. But it was just a work where I thought I've seen Promises Fulfilled a little better. They weren't trying to do a whole lot, but I think I'm going to not single him and try to use a few others in there.
You can tell this guy's excited about what he does. Brandon, thanks again for your time. Yeah. Enjoy the rest of the morning. It's going to warm up as the sun comes up. Lots of horses to take a look at, including a lot of the Europeans, so I'm sure you're excited about that. Yeah, excited to see Roaring Lion and Abel, all the other ones. I'm excited to see Yoshida work. He's really kind of caught the eye, and he's got to, talk about the power. I've seen nothing but power from Yoshida, so I'm excited to see what he does. And, we're about, 5 days out now? Let's get some sleep. We thank Brandon. We found out what Brandon had to say about Promises Fulfilled, but what did trainer Dale Romans think about the work?
Well, we just wanted to see that he still had his energy. He wasn't getting tired, and that's what we saw. But he went pretty fast, I thought. Fast horses just work fast, and they do it easy. I like to see them when they walk off this gap that they've already recovered and gotten their breath and they're wore out, and that's how it looks.
Let's talk about Seven Trumpets. We'll be running in the dirt mile. Graded Stakes Placed has put forth 3 recent very good efforts against similar competition. What did he show you this morning?
This little horse, this little engine that could. He just keeps getting better and better. The good thing about him is he's working fast now, not wanting to pull up. He's liking what he's doing. He's figuring it out. And when you keep knocking on the door, eventually it's going to open.
Dale Romans talking there about his sprint contender, Promises Fulfilled, and also his dirt mile contender as well, Seven Trumpets. And Caton, we heard Brandon's assessment. Trainers are going to have different assessments of their own horses, obviously. Always going to try to be as positive as possible. Dale's done a great job with this horse from the Triple Crown races and then converting him back to a sprinter where he's really, really flourished.
Dale is, I think, very focused on the target always. Has a plan and then a backup plan in mind the entire time. And I think, when he made the decision for Promises Fulfilled to go into the sprint, I was a little skeptical. But he seems pretty adamant and pretty confident in the decisions he's making. And I think, in essence, it's a testament to his knowledge of his horses and also how the track plays and how things could come together. So if he's going in the sprint, then I'm with him. And especially now with the XY Jet coming out, I feel like it looks like he's made the right call in advance. Right. You never want to wish ill will on anybody else's horses, but Dale can't be too disappointed that XY Jet is out. Okay, we heard from Brandon Staubel about City of Lights work. We were live on set yesterday when it happened, and we thought that maybe, or at least I thought that it took him a little bit of time to kind of get himself comfortable on the racetrack. But once he did, I'm like, man, I thought he was going 49 seconds, and he went 47 and change. Yeah, it was the time was very, very good. I still thought he lost a little focus in the. I'm not sure if it was the turn, but he sort of drifted out, and I just sort of wondered about that work. But I think if Mike McCarthy said that this is kind of how he is, and if it was by design to kind of have him in the middle of the racetrack like that, then I think it's a positive sign to be sure. Now, this workout, this in company, was a very different style workout, obviously. Liam the Charmer and working in company with the filly, paved. And I thought this was, by contrast, a great workout. And I guess I'm saying great versus good, and times being irrelevant to me, because it was a faster work for Mike McCarthy's dirt horse, and probably what he was looking for. But in terms of the workouts of the turf horses, I thought that was spectacular, even if it was slower, just because of the way they went and the way they went together. I'm very interested to hear what he has to say about it.
We're going to get another vantage point of this workout from Aaron Greider, who was actually wearing a helmet cam a little bit later on in the show, so you'll want to stay tuned for that. Kane's interested in what Mike McCarthy has to say. Well, let's give her what she wants.
I thought City Light worked really well this morning. Very pleased, more or less what he shows us every time he goes out there. Kind of runs through the gears a little bit. Final quarter in about 23, so very happy with that. Gallop out was great. Javier seemed like he was very pleased. I think this horse is relishing this racetrack. Last two on the turf, Paved and Liam the Charmer, just a little bit of a maintenance work, leg stretcher. One runs 1 3/8, the other 1.5 miles. I couldn't have been happier. Just, wanted to get them over the grass and see how they handled it. Obviously, the way the turf was coming up, it looks like there's a little bit of give in the ground, but they both seem to be fine.
No, Javier Castellano and Aaron Greider both shipped in to work those two on the grass. And how did they seem to think of the work?
Yeah, they both thought, each one of them worked well in their own right. Paved is really coming around at the right time, and she's pretty much push button. Liam the Charmer is only going to go as fast as he has to go, so it was a great work for both. Aaron said for a big horse he handled the turf fine, and Javier thought definitely was just in a nice rhythm.
Local horsemen love when the Breeders' Cup is on their home surface, at their home track, including trainer Brett Calhoun, who has a major player in this year's Breeders' Cup filly and mare sprint, a race that he's won before. Brett Calhoun with 2 Breeders' Cup wins on the same day. Let's take a look back.
And away they go. On the inside, Chamberlain Bridge, but Central City is fastest. Alongside of that, we have Stradavinsky. On the far side, Canadian Ballet. Tropic Storm is in there with Bridgetown and Zip Me right there in the red cap. Racing in behind that now, we have Rose Catherine, Waveline. Silver Timber is 4 lengths off these leaders. California Fag far back, but making ground in the green colours. Behind that comes Quick Enough. And then we come back to Grand Adventure, and behind that is Due Date. They come into the top of the lane, and Central City's the leader. Stradavinsky is right there as well. Stradavinsky coming to take them on, and Bridgetown in the centre of the track. Bridgetown on the outside, Stradavinsky, Silver Timber, Waveline starting a late run, and Zip Me on the inside. They come for home now. Bridgetown on the outside gets the lead from Central City, and Zip Me's coming home late. Chamberlain Bridge on the outside. Chamberlain Bridge coming flying into white breakers. Chamberlain Bridge has mowed them all down, and Chamberlain Bridge has won the sprint. Central City would be second. 4-way photo for third. That'll be between Heels sent on their 1 3/8 journey, and they all came away beautifully. Harmonious broke smartly. It's going to be interesting now as Harmonious going to go to the lead today. She is right now. She's showing good speed on the far side. But now it's Eclair, DeLune and Plumania. Those two kick through on the inside, and Shared Account settles in the 4th position. Kentasormo is Red Desire in 5th. He's now 4.5 off the leaders. And here's Midday, pretty keen to go on. White sleeves down at the rail. Hibayib is racing in the mid-pack now, giving them 7-length start. Miss Keller on the inside of that. Then back to Kia Tana, who's been taken back 3rd last. Hot Cha-Cha is 2nd last. And Forever Together, the early trailer. There's got to be 12, 13 lengths from first to last as they come through the stretch with 1 lap to go. And it's Olivia Opalio out here on Kumania, leading it just over a length to Eclair DeLune. Shared Account is down at the rail, and Harmonious close today in the 4th spot, 3 lengths off the leaders. Here's Midday now in a good spot down at the rail. Midday's in 5th, 4 lengths off the leaders. Red Desire could keep her in though. Red Desire's right up alongside of Midday as they go onto the back stretch. In behind that, Frankie Dettori and Hibayib. They are now 7 off the lead. Down at the rail comes Miss Keller. Then it's Kiatana, the grey Forever Together, and the long shot Hot Cha-Cha is the trailer, 10 lengths off the leaders. So they make their way to the half-mile pole, and Plumania now is the one to catch. Plumania a length and a half. But Claire de Lune is travelling comfortably in second. Harmonium's on the far side. Shared Account at the rail. Midday races between horses in the fifth spot. Then it's Red Desire, Miss Keller. Hibayiv as the blue colours. Only 5 off them. They're bunching up out here. Just behind that, Kiatana, Forever Together, and Hot Cha-Cha trails. A Bunchfield comes to the top of the lane. Plumania the leader. Now a Claire de Lune though, and a Claire de Lune is going well. A Claire de Lune strikes the front. Harmonious, Red Desire, Red Cap, Midday in the white sleeves looking to get out, is in tight. Midday's going to try to pick it up. Down the centre of the track, Kiatana's running a huge one. Red Desire, Claire de Lune, Midday on the inside, running on. Shared Account out of nowhere. Hibayiv out of nowhere. Any one of a half dozen can win it. Shared Account on the inside, and Midday on the outside of those two comes Kiatana. Shared Account in a driving finish is outrun Midday. Kiatana a huge run.
Well, we've seen some classic horses on the racetrack already this morning. Accelerate's obviously the highlight of that. Roaring Lion yet to come. But this is a horse, Caden, that's on the outside looking in, and this is Gunnevera. Speaks to the depth of this year's classic field, that a horse that deserves to be in the race based on his resume still needs a defection.
Gunnevera is interesting because he always tries hard, but he rarely wins in the big races. He is 6 for 18 lifetime. He has just one win this year, and that came at Gulfstream Park in a little allowance race. It was a tough race, but it wasn't anything akin to a Breeders' Cup race or even the other types of races he's been running in. But just when you count him out is when he comes up with a powerful performance. He was third in the Pegasus World Cup to Gunrunner and West Coast, well beaten in that. He ran very well in the Travers to finish second to West Coast. I never know what to make of this horse because he's not the type of horse that catches your eye on the racetrack, but he does go out there and a hard-knocking, trying type that will give a good account of himself if given the opportunity in the running room. Having seen him, too, in his through his 3-year-old campaign, he's a horse that can get very light body-wise and lose weight and things, and he looks physically very good right now.
I mean, that's probably why he cost, $16,000 as a yearling, and he's earned over $3 million. And Caden, he ran a winning race in the Woodward, and it's kind of a shame because the connections gave him time off. They wanted him to be at his best for the Classic. He ran on August the 10th at Gulfstream. It was a public workout victory. And then in the Woodward, he had a very similar trip to Yoshida, the eventual winner. He was hung 11 wide on the turn, closed considerable ground to be second over Leofric, who came back this past weekend to win the Fayette at Keeneland. So Gunnevera, were he to get in, I think he would be a horse that would fly under the radar, that people would need to pay a little bit more attention to than just what you see on paper from top to bottom, because I think he's coming into this race the right way.
Yeah, I just want to point out something with the pony. This is something I've seen from him in the afternoon in the paddock. He's a horse who he can be very kind as far as how he is galloping when he's left alone. When you start to tell him what to do, he gets a little resentful. You saw him go up to the pony and kind of stop and pin his ears and plant his feet. And I've seen him in the paddock in the afternoon act up really, really badly. So he's sort of a Jekyll and Hyde type horse, if you will, as far as personality is concerned.
The horse that beat him in their most recent encounter in the Woodward is Yoshida. And as Brandon Stovall mentioned just moments ago, this horse is expected to work, as Bill Mott has worked several horses today, Breeders' Cup and non-Breeders' Cup types. Yoshida, well, we've talked about him over the course of the last several days, Caton. This is a horse who had built his career on the turf. They decided to give the dirt a try, not only to give the horse a try on dirt, but because the Woodward, quite honestly, wasn't coming up that strong, and it was like the perfect situation for them to give this horse a chance.
I believe that's Penny Chavez, who is a regular work rider and exercise rider for Bill Mott. She is lighter weight. She's more akin to jockey size, but really very, very good established, experienced exercise rider in her own right. And this will be, I think, if it's typical of Mott's works, very controlled. You'll see Penny has a nice hold of the reins and good contact with the horse's mouth. He's got his neck arched. He's pushing off nicely. And we can just kind of watch as this one happens live. It's kind of fun to watch. So he hasn't worked yet, but I don't, sometimes Bill will gallop them all the way, a long ways around before the workout, or he might have opted not to breeze him today.
It certainly looked like the horse was going to break off for a work. We certainly thought so, and then never really got going and kind of just a strong gallop at this point. But like you said, and you're very familiar with the way Bill trains, it'll be interesting to see if the horse gets a good strong gallop around here and then maybe eases back into a work, because the horse certainly wants to do more.
Yeah, he did yesterday, too. He was feeling really pretty good. Her feet are in the dashboard now, and the pony coming up to her. I suspect what they're going to do, there's Bill on the pony, actually. So he rode up next to her and told her something. They may ease up, pull him up. And this is something that I haven't seen a lot of trainers do, but I have seen Bill doing lately, where he will let the horse catch its breath. So you gallop a little bit, loosen up completely, almost make him think he's going to breeze, pull him up, and then wait a little bit, stand him up, let him catch their breath. Sometimes you let the exercise rider put the irons up, but this looks like she might be done. I'm not sure. We'll see. She's waiting to hear what Bill Mott is telling her. And I believe that's Kenny on the other pony, assistant to Bill Mott. And you can see, so they pulled him up. They let him catch his breath so he's not too keen. You're trying to outsmart the horse, essentially. If they do go off at this point, it's because they wanted to make sure that he didn't go off too quickly and just take off like a rocket. Again, just kind of outsmarting him, taking him out of his routine, mixing it up so he's not quite sure what to expect and has to listen to the rider. It sure looks like they're going to breeze now.
Yeah, that was just a very interesting scenario with Bill coming up, talking, and here we go.
Now, and I've seen him do this now. It's something that's more recent than from when I worked for him. We didn't do it, but it does make a lot of sense because rather than going into a workout full blast, guns a-blazing, there's a lot of stress on the rider as well as the horse when you know you have the work coming in terms of anticipation. So this way, you break that up a little bit. You stop, you slow down, you trick him a little, and he goes off more gradually because he's not quite sure what to anticipate or what to expect. And now he is pretty collected. You can see he did get into his work pretty quickly, though.
We'll let you enjoy the remainder of Yoshida's work as we look forward to his final major preparation for the Classic.
So she never even really had to ask or let him do anything, and he's on cruise control. I would say the only part of it that looked like a breeze from where we were sitting, but I'm sure he's going a lot faster than it seems, was about the last eighth of a mile, where he kind of was striding out to the wire. he finishes in the gallop out faster than I think he was working in some parts of the work.
point.
But I think that is probably by design as well. They didn't want him to do too much. Bill wanted it pretty controlled. And Penny's very good at knowing exactly what he wants. Yoshida is a strong horse. Really, you and I were talking about he has the action of a turf horse, a little bit higher knee action, but boy, he covers a tremendous amount of ground with his stride, Joe.
Yeah, this is a really tough call for me because I did like the Woodward, but again, watching him train, and you and I were talking about it when our mics were down, that the knee action is high. I will say this, in the Woodward, the horse did not have a great trip, was shuffled back a bit, was hung 10 wide, so when the horse was able to finish, it was on the outside clear of other horses. So again, this is one of those horses, at least for me, Caton, and I'd like to get your opinion as well, kind of on the fence for the Classic, whether or not I'm going to use prominently on my tickets or whether or not I'm going to fade to an extent.
You know, I think most people are it's a love-hate thing. They either are all over him and going to make huge plays with him on top, or the opposite. Wonder Gadot on the track, we saw her breeze, and she was extremely keen, which we're told is her way. And look at her jumping and bucking. She looks like a Lipizzan through the stretch. Wow. Boy, her exercise rider earns his pay. He could be a rodeo rider. The way she lunges and leaps through the air. This is a filly who's definitely feeling good.
Brandon Staubel, when he reviewed the workout for us, he absolutely loved it. She went really fast, and she's obviously feeling tremendous. And I keep saying this, Caton, over the course of the last few days since we've seen her train and seen her work, that this, to me, with how keen she is in the mornings, and it's a very difficult, obviously, task to get her to settle down in any way, shape, or form, that, you know, she's going to show speed. I mean, she's going to go out there, just based on the way she's training. I know she does this a lot, but you would think that she would be forwardly placed, because if she's tough to control in the mornings like this, she's going to be tough to control in the afternoon.
You would think that's what would happen. You know, it's such a hard call to know what's contributing to that type of behavior. Is it just feeling so good and so sharp? Is it the cool air that's kind of driving her on as well? But I will say horses seem to know the difference between the morning and the afternoon. And I've seen horses where I totally expected them to run a certain way based on everything I'd seen in the morning, and it didn't prove to be true. But you definitely would lean toward thinking that and watching her for sure.
She's settling down a little bit now, maybe getting some of that pent-up energy out.
When she finally bucks,
that's actually Lone Sailor.
She bucks herself into submission. Yes, that Lone Sailor is, by contrast, the consummate pro. He gallops beautifully. He works beautifully. He gives you every indication in the morning that he's a top-class horse, going to fire a huge race every single time. And again, sometimes that's a little misleading. For instance, in the Kentucky Derby, you would have thought that if you were going off of how he breezed and how he looked, he would have been a must-use. Other factors contributing perhaps to his performance, but he did not perform in the Derby the way he performed in the morning.
Tom Amos indicating that he will go in the Classic, and this is the moment we've been waiting for since they crossed the line in the Arc de Triomphe, Kate, and this is Enable, the first of the European Brigade that we're going to get a look at. She looks to become the first Arc de Triomphe winner to pull off the Breeders' Cup Turf double, and to say she is a vision of class would be a vast understatement.
Well, you know, it's fun to watch the Europeans. This is one of the great things about the Breeders' Cup, is the opportunity to see so many different styles and so many different things happening in how horses are prepared. European style is much different from North American racing as far as how horses are trained. Most of the horses are not trained at a racetrack. They're trained at a yard. They don't do the same thing every day. There are winding paths and courses for them to take. They don't travel around the same oval in the same direction at the same distance every single solitary day. So I always marvel when I see the Euros come over here, and they're so professional and they adapt so well. A filly like Enable, who has spent virtually her entire life, as far as training is concerned, overseas, that comes over here with her pony, is going about her business. But they will take them down in the chute That's the extension off the track where it's a little quieter, where they're away from the traffic. And this way they can go in a pattern rather than right in the same circle around the racetrack. They might do some serpentines or some smaller circles and figure eights, and it's almost more akin to a pleasure ride or riding a show horse to kind of warm them up before they actually do anything on the major part of the circuit, around the racetrack. But look at her, ears pricked. She's taking it all in. So far, she's done absolutely nothing wrong. Also, lead ponies are kind of a recent addition to the European and international scene. For many years, when horses came over to the United States, that was the first time those horses ever even saw lead ponies. They never had lead ponies in earlier times. Now you see a few more ponies on training centers, and you also see them used. And I think the Europeans have figured out, and the international racing audiences liked the comfort level of having an escort pony next to their horses.
There's Roaring Lion, ponyless. To wrap up, enable John Gosden's ARC winner Golden Horn, second to found at Keeneland. Enable the odds-on favorite via the international bookmaker. She looks to become the fourth female to win the Breeders' Cup Turf. And here's Roaring Lion, also trained by John Gosden, Caton, and just a couple of days ago, the connection saying that, yes, he will try the Breeders' Cup Classic. This is a horse that's obviously never raced on dirt. John Gosden has 4 Breeders' Cup wins. He did win a Classic, Caton, with Ravens Pass, but that was over the synthetic race course at Santa Anita when they had synthetics. He's 8-1 in the international books, getting slightly more respect than Mendelssohn, who's actually raced and performed well on the main track.
Well, I'm excited about seeing this horse in the Classic, but probably not as excited as Ken Ramsey, who owns Kitten's Joy, the sire of Roaring Lion, is to see this Classic winner off of those 4 consecutive Group 1 victories overseas. He takes his racetrack with him. He's run at Sandown, at York, at Leopardstown, at Ascot, and magnificent to watch him on television. Even more fun to get to see him in person here in the flesh on the racetrack.
They're moving their way up the chute, as Kate was mentioning earlier, with Enable and now Roaring Lion. Roaring Lion, Kate, you look at his pedigree, there are some Kitten's Joys that run well on the main track, and you look at the dam side of the family out of a Street Sense mare, you would think dirt, but when you do deeper research into the female side, a lot of grass on that side of the family as well. So you never really know until they run on the surface how they're going to perform. We've seen some horses like this in the past, Saki, Giants Causeway, who have performed very well on dirt after shipping over from overseas. We'll have to wait and see on Saturday how Roaring Lion does. And again, 8-1 in the international books. That seems about right to me.
Boy, he's a handsome horse. He is a real looker. When we got that broad shot of all the European horses working in the chute, this is who we have listed as training today at this time period: Comedy, Havana Gray, Legends of War, Enable, Roaring Lion, and Marie's Diamond. I don't know. I haven't had confirmation that all those horses are out there, but that was what was originally on the list. And you see Roaring Lion. And just looking at things a little bit, taking it all in, but at the end of the day, he knows he's a racehorse. He's born to run, and he wants to. And I think he would like to do a little bit more. You see him walk by the starting gate here. That's another part of the process because it's a little different here than it is overseas.
I would think that, and we talked about this earlier, the Root and Riddle post position draw at 4 o'clock this afternoon. You would think that an inside post position would not be ideal for Roaring Lion, a horse that's not used to, and John Gosden has talked about the fact that he hasn't gotten dirt in his face. Inside post position might not be ideal for him. We'll have to wait and see how the post position draw plays out. A little bit later on this afternoon at Equestrian, again, 4 o'clock, the Root and Riddle post position draw for all the Breeders' Cup races. And John Gosden has the 2 big names that we've already seen, but also has another horse on the racetrack right now. This is Legends of War for the Juvenile Turf Sprint Cage.
Guitar Racing Limited owns the son of Scat Daddy, who most recently was 4th at Maison Lafitte on soft going at 3/4 of a mile. He finished 4th. He actually made a kind of a middle move and then was beaten to the wire. I don't know that he slowed down. I think the others just accelerated. He did win 2 of his first 3 starts. So he had an auspicious beginning to his career, and he's got to be respected off of the courses that he's been running over, the company he's been keeping, and the fact that he has handled some given the ground, although it looks like his best races are good to firm.
We've gotten a good look, at least at our television screens and behind us, of some of the Europeans here this morning. But Gabby Gaudet has an even better view. Gabby, what'd you see?
Well, Joe, we saw a bunch of Euros hit the track here today, but I'll start off with observing the 2 horses, Havana Grey and Comedy. Both of them came out here. They did a similar thing as to what the John Gosden horses did, and they went to behind the chute area behind the gate, and they warmed up for a couple of minutes there, probably close to 10 minutes, and then they actually went straight off onto the main track and did a very, very light gallop. It looked like once around, so not too much training there for Havana Grey and Comedy. They kept it pretty light, but as we all saw from the John Gosden trainees, including Enable and Roaring Lion, they took it easy today. They just came out to the track, they went behind the starting gate, and were just jogging pretty much in a figure 8 or even circles there for probably close to 15-20 minutes, I would say. They were on the track for quite some time, but Enable, she looks great in the flesh. Roaring Lion, I would say he's aptly named, at least when he stepped foot onto the track here this morning. He was winning, making some noises, feeling really, really good. So in terms of their energy levels, I really liked what I saw, but at least happy to see at least 2 Euros be able to stretch their legs and put in a light gallop, as we saw from Havana Grey and Comedy.
Well, thanks, Gabby. We're going to see a lot more Euros as the morning rolls on, Caton, including the turf champion from last year, Talismanic, who's supposed to go to the grass a little bit later on. Waldgeist, who could be the second choice in the Breeders' Cup Turf. Expert Eye, one of the favorites for the mile. So still lots of European influence on the racetrack as the morning rolls on. Let's take a look at some more Breeders' Cup horses live on the racetrack. Again, welcome to everyone joining us at Breakfast at Breeders' Cup, brought to us by Windstar and Fasig-Tipton, and all of you watching worldwide. Here's my gal Betty for the Juvenile Fillies Turf. Kate?
My gal Betty was second in the Natama at Woodbine. That has produced a lot of good form in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. Also has won 3 straight to kick off her career, and I think has a big shot in here. This is a filly that I was very eager to get a look at. She has won on yielding turf. She captured the Catch a Glimpse, named for a Breeders' Cup winner herself. She won that one by 4.5 lengths. To me, she seemed to be even better on softer ground, and that may give her a huge edge. She also isn't as pace dependent as some sprinters might be that run on the turf. She can sit close if she needs to, but I think she can also come from off of it. And she's backing up off a mile, or coming back off of a mile, I should say, which I think bodes well, too, as opposed to a few of these horses that are actually trying to stretch out a little bit. Right now, she's just with her pony, and Roger Atfield has been in the game for a long time, and I think it's really neat to see that he has a filly like this who's so beautifully bred for the turf and who has done so much already that he can bring her here. You can see she's not the biggest filly in the world, but she's very agile. And sometimes, Joe, it's the horses that are smaller boned and smaller framed that fare the best if the turf does have a lot of moisture in it, because they tend to skip over the ground versus sink into a boggier type of surface. So if we do get any rain this week or over the weekend, then I think we can expect that there'll be some give in the ground. And if that's the case, I think a horse like my gal Betty will appreciate it.
Latest look at the forecast calls for some showers maybe Wednesday and Thursday, and then for clearing conditions on Friday and Saturday. Bellafina making her appearance here at Churchill Downs this morning, and she got her first look under the Twin Spires yesterday, and today, Kate, we talked about the process, Bellafina going to the starting gate.
A lot of horses that have have broken out of the gate, have done nothing wrong, are going to school in the gate over the course of the next few days. It's just a confidence builder. It's crossing the T and dotting the I and making sure that no detail is overlooked or too small to be concerned with. You want to make sure that your horse is comfortable in the gate. You want to make sure that the gate crew is comfortable with your horse. The easiest way to do that is take them over in the morning when it's not hectic. Let them stand, let them see that it's not a big scary monster, and that even though things are a little bit different than maybe what you are used to at home, it's all going to be fine and it's all the same situation. And usually this really pays off. I can think of very few incidents over the course of Breeders' Cup history where we've had major issues behind the starting gate.
Quality Road.
Yeah, but that was the one. that was the one that stood out.
Beyond major. So Bellafina, she's going to be the favorite, Kate, and most likely in the Tito's Handmade Vodka Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. And the horse she beat 2 races ago, Mother for Fun, came back and won the Rags to Riches for Bob Baffert yesterday. Bob Baffert, assistant trainer Jimmy Barnes, getting off to a good start Breeders' Cup week. Their horses will arrive tomorrow, Tuesday. But definitely flattered by Mother's performance yesterday was Bellafina, who came back out of that race and was even more impressive in the Chandelier.
Yeah, and Mother went to the sidelines. She had a fever and was unable to train the way Bob wanted or needed to be able to get her to the Breeders' Cup. They put Breeders' Cup plans on hold, regrouped, but then when she came out of that incident and was feeling as good as she was and doing as well as she was, they decided to go ahead and run her in the race yesterday, and she was pretty impressive.
Yeah, she took pressure every step of the way and still drew off.
Now, Bellafina is 3 for 4 lifetime. Her only blip was in her maiden start. It's funny, every other start of her life she's been in graded stakes company and it's been a win, but when she faced maidens for the first time, she wound up second. She just was green, I thought, that day, honestly. I don't think it was anything ability-wise for sure. She was highly regarded. I don't know that the other horse was that much better, but she just kind of took one start under her belt. I know another good Bob Baffert horse that required that as well, and it turned out pretty well for American Pharoah. So.
Interesting, too, when we talk about the Root and Riddle post-position draw, this is one of the races, Caton, where I think it's the most critical, and we heard Tom Amos talk about his entrant in the race, Serengeti Empress, and in discussing potential strategy with a filly of his that has speed, he talked about how much speed was entered in this race, and Bellafina is one of those horses. So it'll be interesting to see how the post position plays out, and I think it's very important for the juvenile fillies. We talked about Doug O'Neill sending his horses here, many of them getting their first looks on the racetrack. We saw Pavel and Mopatism earlier. Here's B Squared.
B Squared was beaten just ahead in a restricted stakes race at Los Alamitos. He hasn't won in a long time, and he's been running primarily in restricted competition, but he also hasn't had an opportunity to run a true sprint distance in a while. He's cross-entered for the Breeders' Cup Sprint at 3/4 of a mile and the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, so he's going to get a shot to get to truly sprint versus a mile and a 16th. Most of his recent races have been longer. I'm not quite sure what to make of him, but I think as far as a horse that's feeling really good on the track, you can definitely make that case. And also a good-looking horse. Get a good look at his hindquarters here, how he's jogging beside the pony. He's striding nicely. He looks well-balanced. And, that I think I've talked about the fact that I thought, depending on where he ends up, in particular, the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint was, for me, one of the hardest races to get a handle on and to decipher. I'm going to have to put a lot more. There's going to be time spent on every race, but that one is one, for me, that I just don't have a good hold of yet.
It's been a mixed bag over the years. We've had 4 winners that have been either on the lead or just off the pace, a couple of stalkers, and 4 deep closers as well. So it will be interesting to see how that race plays out. And again, we will have the post position draw later on this afternoon. Stormy Embrace for the Filly and Mare Sprint was out a little bit earlier this morning. We're going to get our first look at her. And she's just kind of taking everything in as well, getting a little bit of a gallop.
She's
morning.
Actually had a pretty remarkable campaign. in her own right. 20 starts lifetime. She's been first or second in 12 of them. She's primarily raced in Florida, although she did spend some time at Monmouth Park as well. She kind of earned it the hard way, but has gotten better and better. And she won the Princess Rooney Breeders' Cup Win and You're In Challenge race by 6 open lengths at 7 furlongs. She loves this distance. Her trainer, Kathleen O'Connell, is, I think, always under the radar and one of the best, least known trainers I can think of. She made a mark for herself previously in developing some top horses, that Breeders' Cup horses. So I have no concern that she is not capable, if given the right horse, to be able to win a Breeders' Cup race. We know that can happen. Stormy Embrace, to me, is a horse that isn't going to get respect because of the competition that she's been beating. But if Kathleen thinks that she is good enough to be here, then that's good enough for me. I really respect this filly and will take a good hard look at her. And she's not doing anything wrong on the track for sure.
Yeah, sure. Her most recent start, Stormy Embrace, was an absolute toss-out. She broke slowly. She had major traffic trouble. She made a middle move and flattened out. Use the Princess Rooney if you want a good gauge of her talent. Lots of reporters funneling in from all over the world, all over the country, and one of the big names in the game is with Gabby Gaudet. Gabby?
That's right, Joe. And here with Jay Privman flying in last night. I see you packed appropriately. It's a little chilly this morning, huh, Jay?
It's a little cooler than where I come from.
Of course, coming from the West Coast and reporting for GRF. Jay, talk about all of the works that you saw just a few days ago at Santa Anita. I believe there were 11, and you were on site to witness them all.
Yeah, there were quite a few on Friday and more on Saturday than I traveled yesterday. The best of them to me were, the West Coast is normally a very kind of indifferent workhorse. I thought his work was pretty exceptional. I thought Accelerate worked really well. He's always been kind of an okay workhorse, but his works this year have kind of mirrored his development as a horse. He's just gotten better as a worker, and obviously his races have been terrific, and that's why he's favored in the Classic. Mackenzie's certainly doing well. The one horse I was like kind of nitpicky on in my story was Catalina Cruiser, who, I mean, worked great. He worked in 59 and 4. But he kind of got pushed along a little bit at the end, and usually he breezes against the bit, and I just thought it was different for him. It was still fast work and a good work, and he's still the horse to beat, I think, in the dirt mile. It was just something I took a little notice of, and I want to watch how he trains back here this week. So those were a few of the many that we saw. Game Winner was really good. Selkirk's trying to come off of the layoff to win the Filly and Mare Sprint. I'm trying to think of all of them. There were just so many. It was like my head was spinning by the time it was over.
It's okay. I know how you feel, especially with all these taking to the track every single morning here at Churchill. But, Jay, let's dive just a little bit more into the Breeders' Cup Classic. Accelerate took to the track earlier today as well. Your overall thoughts of it? I mean, it's one of the more unusual Breeders' Cup Classics, just considering all the different avenues that the contenders are coming from.
I agree. There's so many horses in this race who I think have a chance of winning the race on their best day. Obviously, Accelerate's performances at 1.25 miles this year have been sensational. He's 3 for 3 at the distance, and that's really was a question for him coming into this year. But then you look at horses like Mind Your Biscuits and what he's accomplished this year, and West Coast having a good comeback race. We know what he's capable of on his best day. You start with those horses. Mackenzie had a nice comeback race. Axelrod's certainly gotten better. And that's not even counting all these horses that have come over from Europe. I mean, Mendelssohn's race in the Jockey Club Gold Cup was terrific. Thunder Snow has run well in his race over here. In the Jockey Club Gold Cup as well, I thought. And certainly, if you get another pace meltdown, maybe even Discreet Lover would be in the mix again. So it's really an interesting race. And there's several others in there with, Roaring Lion coming over from Europe. It's really one of the more fascinating classics I think we've seen in a long time, where you don't have like one or two standouts.
Exactly. I think we've grown accustomed to that in the past couple of years with the likes of Gunrunner and Arrogate and such. But also the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, you'll be doing the most digging for that particular race. So what are your thoughts on that? And, do you think Catalina Cruiser is a real deal?
I do. I think Catalina Cruiser is a phenomenal horse. I mean, his record is terrific, being 4 for 4. He's a big, beautiful horse. If you haven't seen him before, he's going to remind you a little bit of Justify, just in the way he looks. A big chestnut horse with a white blaze, and he's physically imposing like Justify is as well. So he looks, not that he's a Triple Crown winner, obviously, but he's built of that mold. But I think City of Light's going to run really well also. I think a one-turn mile is right up his alley. He's trained great coming into this race, and I think the two horses from the West Coast are going to be the top two in that race.
I mean, it's kind of interesting how the Breeders' Cup, especially the dirt mile, it changes, the configuration everywhere we go in terms of venue. Last year, the two-turn mile at Del Mar. This year, the one-turn mile. I mean, don't you think handicappers really, really have to start considering this?
I do, especially, I mean, he's not running this year because he's retired, but an example of a horse who I think that really impacted last year, who would have been a major player this year, was Practical Joke, who was so much better around one turn than two, and to me he was just a non-factor trying to go two turns last year in the dirt mile, whereas a one-turn mile. So yes, I think the configuration for this year at Churchill Downs being a one-turn mile is something that you really need to go to school on, because there might be some horses who maybe lost their punch going two turns who are going to be a lot more effective turning back to a one-turn race.
Besides the Classic and the dirt mile, are there any particular horses that you're really excited to see on Breeders' Cup weekend?
I think, like everybody, I'm really excited to see Enable, for being a two-time ARC winner and trying to win the Turf in the same year that she won the ARC, which has never been done. And the other thing this is a different thing slightly from your question, but another thing that I'm kind of looking forward to seeing potentially happen is, no horse has ever won a Breeders' Cup race on grass and a Breeders' Cup race on dirt. It's never happened in the history of the Breeders' Cup, and Mendelssohn's going to try and do that because he won the Juvenile Turf last year and he's in the Classic this year. So that's an interesting aspect of this one. But if you said who's the one horse you really want to see that you haven't seen before, it's obviously Enable.
I think you're in the mix of a lot of people for sure that are excited, including myself. Well, Jay, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning.
I'm just wondering, who are you rooting for in the Juvenile Fillies Turf?
I gotta go with the homer there and root for my husband, but it's going to be a really exciting year for sure.
All right, Gabby, good luck.
Thank you. All right, guys, back to you.
It's already been an exciting year for Gabby. She gets married, and her husband has a horse in his first year as a trainer running in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf.
And I believe we're going to get a chance to talk to Norm on set a little bit later on. Back to live action on the racetrack and in the gate, to be exact. Much Better, once again, another schooler in the starting gate.
And Much Better is a horse that is, I've lost my page, Juvenile Turf. There we go, for Bob
Lots
Baffert.
of horses to keep track of.
Well, and the majority, well, I shouldn't say majority, but a lot of Bob Baffert's horses have yet to arrive.
Right.
But a few came with that first wave, including
Right.
Mother, who ran yesterday. Much Better has been here. He's in the starting gate now. He's owned by Three Chimneys Farm and broke his maiden, then went right to the Zuma Beach, where he was a good second after showing a little bit of speed. He was the beaten favorite that day, but I thought very solid race and moved up, improving. He's what we could see of him before he went in the gate, very kind of a handsome-looking guy by Pioneer of the Nile.
We saw this with Catholic Boy last year, with him racing in the Juvenile Turf and then becoming a really good dirt horse this year. This horse has the pedigree to be good on dirt as well by Pioneer of the Nile out of a Vindication, where they paid $600,000 for this horse as a yearling. He is a Ridgeling, and you see right there, a break from the gate. I'm thinking Bob probably sent a lot of his younger horses here to maybe get that extra couple of days of acclimation and schooling. We just saw him leaving the starting gate and going into a pretty strong gallop here.
Yeah, well, he got out of the gate. He's got the cool air, and he's feeling really good. But he'll settle right back in eventually. Not sure that maybe Dana on him. It kind of looks like her. Married to assistant Jim Barnes. They are the dynamic duo, truly, and have been the right hand of Bob Baffert for a long time. She has her irons a little bit longer. They say the longer you ride, Joe. But it does help get you some leverage with a horse who's going to put their head down and try to buck and play and is feeling good. Contrast, though, to Wonder Godot, who we saw feeling really good, who continued to kind of buck and challenged her rider repeatedly. This one is settling in nicely, and now it gets a couple of those bucks out of its system and is feeling fine. And now the ears are pricked, and we get on with it, and we do what we're supposed to do with a nice long rein too. So this is a nice little move. And again, just leg stretcher, just get familiar with the circumstances and maintain. That's the key word.
more Euros taking to the racetrack as the morning moves forward here. Soldier's Call is in front, and the Mac of Bullet is behind, as once again, Soldier's Call is going to be one of the favorites, Caden, in the juvenile turf sprint, and the Mac of Bullet is the juvenile fillies turf participant that we're seeing on the screen right now. Soldier's Call is one of the overseas betting favorites. I like to look at those overseas prices, particularly when it comes to the European horses, to kind of get a gauge on what they're thinking over there. And Soldier's Call is one of the favorites in what looks to be an absolutely wide open race, a race that is going to be tough to get a handle on because it's a new race, for one, and you're getting that Euro versus American type scenario where there's going to be prices to be had all over the board.
So the Irish bred filly Mac and Bullet was second, beaten a neck to Fairyland. She hasn't been able to get past that one. Last couple of starts were tough beats. She really ran two very, very good, almost winning races to wind up just a neck and a nose shy of Fairyland in her last couple. And before that was her win. All of those races on good to firm ground. Although it could be argued that the Europeans as a whole and international horses in general are going to be a little bit more accustomed to softer conditions. If the weather forecast holds true, we are calling for rain beginning by Wednesday, Thursday, and then letting up. That's the good news for Breeders' Cup. But if that is the case, and it is a real softer yielding turf course, that is something that at least they've had experience with most of the time, whereas a lot of our horses will never have experienced those types of conditions.
Soldier's Call, a little bit more composed in front. The Mac and Bullet is behind, throwing her head around a little bit there. Soldier's Call, third most recently in a Group 1 in France. The form has continued to get better and better, at least when you're looking at the ratings from overseas. As I mentioned earlier, the international favorite at 3-1, Archie Watson, is the trainer. And this is a horse who has 4 wins from 7 starts. You see a lot of these international horses coming over for the variety of turf races that we have for the younger horses, Caton, and a lot of them already have 5, 6, 7, even 8 starts under their belt.
Yeah, 7 starts for Soldier's Call with 4 wins. That's a pretty impressive resume, really.
Yeah.
He's won half his starts, more than half, and on very differing types of courses and surfaces. He won on good to soft ground. He won on good to firm ground. He won at Haydock, Ascot, and he ran actually pretty well at Doncaster. So pretty established form for Soldier's Call. What's funny, Joe, is as many Euros as we're seeing right now and that have arrived, and particularly I know a lot of excitement around John Gosden's horses and based on what they had accomplished previously, but the number one in terms of pre-entries for the Breeders' Cup was Aidan O'Brien, who pre-entered more horses than any other conditioner, and he has yet to arrive. We still haven't even seen any of his contingent. They get in, I believe, tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll get a chance to see them again after that 42-hour quarantine period. We'll have more news on the Aidan O'Brien trained horses. Once they arrive here and go through that quarantine, as Kate mentioned, we'll get a chance to look at them as well. This show, the Breeders' Cup Work Show, will go all the way through Thursday, so still lots of action to see.
Oh, hopefully we'll have seen all of them. We will see all the Breeders' Cup contenders, unless someone, for some reason, doesn't go to the racetrack. But if they're out there, we should get a look at them.
Lightning Spear is on the racetrack now. Getting a look at him. Breeders' Cup Mile contender, going the wrong way towards the chute, like we've seen so many of these Euros do this morning, Kate.
Yeah, Lightning Spear won 3 starts ago at Goodwood, the Qatar Sussex Stakes. He is well-seasoned and well-traveled, closing in on $2 million in earnings, 7 for 26 lifetime. And this is what I think of when I think of a European horse, which is really not fair because just like any of our horses, they come in all shapes and sizes. But you see a bit more of less refined, kind of more coarse type of a horse. And That's not anything to do with their ability or their running style or anything else. It's just they just have that look about them. Sometimes they're longer bodied, kind of a lankier type versus the horses that carry a tremendous amount of weight. But that said, Talismanic has the look of a pony when you look at him. I mean, he carries quite a bit of weight, and he's a complete contrast to some of the other horses that you'll see in his yard. So again, you can't generalize really. They're individuals, and each one is different. But this one really, Lightning Spear has really attractive head. You can see it's almost chiseled. Ears are forward. He is really looking at everything there is to look at.
Yeah, he seems to be enjoying himself out there, and this might be a little bit of a Euro sleeper for the mile. Actually defeated Expert Eye 3 starts ago and carrying 134 pounds in the Group 1 Qatar Sussex Stakes at Goodwood. And Expert Eye is going to be one of the favorites for the Breeders' Cup Mile. Lightning Spear, international race books right now about 15-1. But again, it looks like the Breeders' Cup Mile, as so often is the case, although it hasn't been the case really in recent years, and really hasn't been the case since Goldakova's 3 consecutive wins, where you look first at the Europeans. But in reality, Kate, the Americans have actually won 6 of the last 7 Breeders' Cup Miles.
Yeah, I think that would surprise a few people if you just asked them blindly that type of question. Lightning Spear's impressive in the endurance part of his career. If you look at how long he's been running, and he's had layoffs as long as a year or more in between, and went out August 29th of 2013 on a winning note, came back October 29th of 2014 and won again. That's pretty remarkable. Looking at him physically, you would never guess that this is a 7-year-old. He looks like a young horse. He's very youthful and spry, and a lot of older horses will tend to gain a little bit of weight, or they'll tend to spread. Sometimes you see just their conformation generally change a little bit, just like people as they start to age. This guy looks great.
And Lightning Spear's not a gelding at the age of 7. He actually still has all his parts, so you don't see that very often in the racing game either. Splashy Kisses for Doug O'Neill. We saw quite a few Doug O'Neill horses this morning, and this is live. This is Splashy Kisses, who watched the heels of her rival when she was at Churchill Downs. The Tom Amoss trained one of the favorites for this is a Doug O'Neill train, but the horse that she chased last time out, Serengeti Empress for Tom Amoss, won that race by 19.5 lengths. Splashy Kisses got a good look at her as she crossed the finish line. But again, Doug's not afraid to run, and the resume is good enough that she should be here.
Well, she had won before when she broke her maiden at Del Mar, and in a fairly solid time on the front end. She didn't get out of the gate in the Pocahontas. She kind of got bumped around a little bit, and I think that took her completely out of her game and by surprise, especially when you're going to be going a routed ground. To lose position for a lightly raced filly like that can be extremely disconcerting. The fact that she was able to kind of put herself together and run on for second is significant. Now, the time looks really slow, but this is one of those races where I feel like no one has a good gauge on it as far as how good it was, because the winner won by so many.
Right.
But Splashy Kisses, nonetheless, as I mentioned, had shown some really good early speed, and I'm curious to see what she does at a distance of ground if she can get a clean break.
Mentioned earlier, lots of reporters traveling in from all over the country and all over the world. And one of the most prominent also happens to be a member of our Players Show team. Let's check in with Gabby.
Well, the Euros took to the track for the first time today, and it's a good thing that Fanny shipped in with us today, Fanny Salmon, who will be joining us this weekend on the Players Show as well. Fanny, how you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. It's always great to be here back at Churchill Downs, and it's always great to be working with this crew for the Breeders' Cup.
And it's great to have you here so we can pick your brain about some of these European contenders, and 2 of them we should obviously start with talking about, Enable and Roaring Lion. They hit the track today. You were standing right next to me, went back in the chute and did very, very light training. Your overall thoughts of seeing them hit the track today?
Well, I think they wanted to stay away from all the madness, although Enable is quite experienced. They wanted to take a good look at her and see how she had taken the trip. And she was tremendous in the arc, and she's an outstanding filly. But she had a tough race, and she didn't have the perfect season. She was, as John Gosden told me on the day of the arc, she grew really frustrated as a filly, seeing the others being able to work out, and she had to stay and remain at a slow pace. So I wanted to see how she was doing today, and she was really well and composed. Of course, we need to keep an eye and see how they evolve over the days, because first time out, it's cold. They've had a long trip, so you want to see how they evolve over the next couple of days. But she looked good to me. And then the other one that we always want to keep an eye on is Roaring Lion, and he actually roared his way to the track, didn't he? He's very different from Enable, where she is extremely focused and she keeps her mind on the prize. He's very curious, and he wants to see what's happening around him. He loves people, he's an incredible horse. He's asked every task that he was asked, and he's got nothing to lose going into the Classic.
Now, we saw those two. We saw a bevy of other horses, including Lightning Spear actually was just on the track too. Fanny, what else can we expect from this morning, and what will you primarily be looking for?
Well, I'm looking for the Henri Femme horses going to the turf track, because usually we don't see these horses on the turf. So they're going, I think, at 9:45, and I want to see how they're taking to the softer course. We know Talismanic, of course, the returning Breeders' Cup Turf champion, is here, but he's done his best performances on firm or good ground, and we might be a bit on the soft side, so it will be interesting to see how he does, and maybe talk to the connections afterwards. We will also see Bully Dream coming out, and I'm always a little bit biased towards that team. That's Freddie Head, of course, having won 2 Breeders' Cup Mile as a jockey with Miesque and 3 with Goldikova. And actually, this will be the very last year for Régis Barbedette, the head traveling lad who's come on all the trips with Goldikova and other Freddie Head horses, is retiring at the end of the year. So we're going to keep an eye. And she's actually going to be leading the 2-year-old French contenders, Lily Scandal, who won the Prix Marcel Boussac, and the Black Album, the 2-year-old for the juvenile turf.
We'll be looking forward to those. And I wanted to ask you one final question here, Fanny, because the Aidan O'Brien horses from Ballydoyle will be shipping in today, but over the course of the summer, a lot of the Ballydoyle horses were affected by a respiratory illness, and it in turn affected the training. Do you think that we need to keep that in the back of the minds for these Ballydoyle horses leading into the Breeders' Cup?
Well, I think that we're seeing horses coming back to their best, and maybe we should be lenient on how we're looking at their form over the summer. Magical, for example, I thought, she didn't have the best trip in the Arc, but she bounced back and won, and she was one I liked very much going into the Arc. I think, some of these horses would probably, if you're only looking at their past form, you might be surprised.
It seems like they went through a little bit of a lull, and they might be kind of on that upward trajectory leading into the Breeders' Cup.
And it's a very frustrating time. We've had several European yards affected by that. That was the case for some French trainers last year. And when nothing goes right in the yard, it's very disparaging. But hopefully, the end of the year, you can start stacking those victories back.
Fanny, thank you so much, and we look forward to pulling you on this show a couple more times in the lead up to the Breeders' Cup.
My pleasure.
All right, back to you guys.
One of the greatest Twitter handles and most apropos, where is Fanny?
Where in the world is Fanny,
she
right?
She could be anywhere. And we're very glad to have her here at Churchill Downs. The Longines Turf, talking about some of the major contenders, including an Able, who we got a chance to see earlier this morning for the first time, defending champion Talismanic. Also Waldgeist, who has been battling with an Able, most likely the second choice, I would guess, in the Longines Turf. Then you've got Chad Brown, of course, well represented as well with Arlington Million winner Robert Bruce, one of the better, stronger American hopes, I would guess, along with Glorious Empire. But let's take a look at Robert Bruce, Caton, as this horse worked in New York. And again, we thank all of our friends, including Naira, XBTV, Keeneland, et cetera, for the use of this video footage. And here's Robert Bruce on the inside of Almanar. Robert Bruce for the turf and Almanar for the mile, both trained, of course, by Chad Brown.
Yeah, and this is, again, very prescribed workout, I guess would be the best way to say it. Chad knows his horses. He's looked for workmates that complement one another, and even though they may be different style horses, he finds the ones that are going to work the best side by side. Robert Bruce on the inside is, I think, maybe the stronger workhorse, and that's probably why he's to the inside. Almanar on the outside, though, is used to running a little bit shorter distance and might have just a little bit more tactical speed to start with. So they're actually kind of mixing it up a little bit and trying to get the outcome even at the end so that both horses get something out of the work. And I like what I'm seeing here with Almanar, especially relaxing nicely to the outside and kind of handling the turn and the course very nicely and evenly. Meanwhile, Robert Bruce is being very patient. He wanted to have the jump on the competition. Now the competition has come to him. You can see he's sort of clocking the horse outside of him, but ends up, maintaining the advantage. Both horses were striding out nicely to the finish at the end of that.
Yeah, that looked like the Arlington Million, except in reverse.
Exactly.
With Robert Bruce coming up on the outside of Almanar for Chad Brown, as you take a look at the field for the Longines turf once again. And it is a fantastic field of turf horses, as is this field, which again will be drawn along with all the other Breeders' Cup races at 4 p.m. Eastern Time this afternoon at EquestriaCon, Kentucky Convention Center. The Rood and Riddle post-draw, all looking very forward to that. Here is the Maker's Mark, Filly and Mare Turf, and Sister Charlie, the likely American favorite in this particular event, but again, lots of European influence in this race. And Santa Monica, one of the many Chad Brown trainees, was involved in a workout. Again, courtesy of Naira is this video. Polara is on the outside. She's not a Breeders' Cup horse, Caden, but Santa Monica is, and she's working on the inside of her.
So Santa Monica is, she's big, first of all, just size-wise. Has a lot of power. You can see that from her hind end. How she pushes off kind of propels her forward. And Ryder's doing a good job balancing her up. Her head, again, a little bit higher, but I think that's a product of him having such a hold on her to try to keep her a little restrained. She doesn't get resentful, which is wonderful, because she sure looks like she would love to be just striding out from her workmate. You can tell that she is still wondering when she's going to be allowed to run by her ears and the way she's kind of taking a sideways glance at the horse to her outside. But she's always in hand. When you hear that expression, right, this is what it looks like, always in hand. In other words, the rider's hands are always very well and firmly connected to her. He might have been kind of tugging on the inside rein just a tad bit more than the outside. I think that was, again, a product of his trying to keep her together with her stablemate. But here, as they allow them to do what they want to do on the gallop out to encourage them, the hands go forward and she takes advantage of it, and finally she gets to win the race, which is what she's born to do.
We've got Opry and Smart Choice in this team coming up next, and you're going to see Opry to the inside, Smart Choice to the outside, and Smart Choice is a Todd Pletcher Argentinian bred who is invading from Peru, coming off a victory in a Group 1 there, a race in which she faced 17 rivals. And again, these horses are very difficult to get a handle on, so it's nice to have this visual, Caton, to see maybe what the horse is capable of doing on the track, because based on past performances, it's really hard, at least for me, to get a handle.
Yeah, I'm just going to watch them as they go to see. This is the first time I'm getting a look at this video. Inside horse obviously has a little bit of the advantage here, and also both horses with a bit more equipment than is always typical of Pletcher horses. I think both of them have figure 8 nose bands, maybe to allow the rider to have a little bit more control. They inside very quick, really striding out, and now you can see both of them. Kind of an explosive turn of foot here around the turn.
Opry on the inside for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, a winner of the With Anticipation, and then fourth last out and a little bit of a disappointing effort as the 8-5 favorite behind 40 under. Maybe a horse that would prefer a little bit firmer ground, the ground that he got at Saratoga last time out into Pilgrim, yielding ground. And again, disappointing fourth, and it really was a non-excuse fourth, at least outside of maybe the ground that he didn't like quite as much. He did have a clear trip, was moving on the turn, just was simply fourth best that day. And again, that's Opry on the inside in this Todd Pletcher team of horses. And again, thanks to Naira for the video. Let's take a look at the juvenile turf right now. Todd Pletcher does have Current, who will be one of the favorites in this particular race off a very impressive win most recently in New York, coming through, at Keeneland in the Bourbon, a race where he overcame trouble and looked really good to get the job done. European influence in this race as well, Caton. Top to bottom, a very intriguing edition of the juvenile turf with, again, as we see on Breeders' Cup, Friday and Saturday, a full field.
You know, it was interesting in thinking about that work with Opry. Opry finished behind 40 under, who we saw work the other day, and it's such a different style of workout, just being trainers' preferences as to how they operate, what they choose to do with their horses to get them ready. When you see horses working in company versus, and almost pitting one against the other, it's an expression of the style of the trainer versus working a horse by themselves. Sometimes it's a product of how many horses you have to work with, too. A smaller trainer doesn't always have the luxury. If they only have about 10 horses in their barn, they can't really be working them one against the other.
Aidan O'Brien has won this race 4 times, 4 of the last 7, in fact, including with Mendelssohn last year. And the Aidan O'Brien horses, of course, expected to arrive in the coming days, and we'll get a chance to see them in the coming days, probably Thursday, as the Europeans continue to arrive at Churchill Downs. More on the Breeders' Cup Work Show from Churchill Downs in just a couple of moments. We're going to take a short break.
The stars will align on November 4th when the top buyers from around the globe gather at Basing-Tipton for the world's premier breeding stock event. One spectacular evening with a catalog featuring no less than 70 graded stakes winners or producers, with nearly half of those being grade ones. Plus a stellar selection of Breeders' Cup winners, champions, and selected weanlings. No other sale packs as much energy and excitement into a single session. Join us for a night of stars, the November sale at Basing-Tipton. Where would you be?
Our win program. It was a big, big day. That's the finest breeding program in Central Kentucky.
Well, Kane, there's going to be a lot of money when it comes to the Breeders' Cup. Purses, betting, those guaranteed pools. We'll talk about those a little bit later on. Lots of action on the track. Some horses that were out there earlier that we haven't gotten a chance to see yet. So we're going to dive right into a few of those right now.
This is the exciting part, to see the horses that we haven't seen yet as they start to arrive dueling. First up, for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, Comes in from Jerry Hollendorfer, was a winner of a maiden special weight at Santa Anita going a mile on September 28th. And kind of aerodynamic looking son of violence out of a Seattle Slew mare. $475,000 sale purchase. So you know going into it that the horse is probably going to be a looker, plus the pedigree to go with it. But a very athletic individual. I like to see the young horses that look like they're putting it together. They get it, growth spurts. Sometimes they're bigger, stronger looking versions of themselves, but at the same time, if they don't know where to put their feet, it doesn't matter. This guy seems like, just from this limited little look jogging, that he's got everything going in the right direction.
I'll say this about him. He was favored against against Game Winner in the maiden race 2 starts back. He was 4-5. Game Winner dusted him. But coming out of that race, Dueling did win very impressively, more impressively than it looks on paper. It was 3 wide on the first turn, 4 wide in hand on the second turn, and 1 under a hand ride. It was a slow pace up front, and he stalked it. This is a horse that's heading in the right direction that will not be one of the big names in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So again, in the right hands with Jerry Hollendorfer, a progressive sort, who won even more impressively than it looks in his first race around 2 turns last time out. I think this is a major player. Now, a horse who's very familiar with the surroundings here at Churchill Downs is Awesome Slew. He's done some very nice work over this racetrack. This is a horse that's begging for a fast pace to run at in the dirt mile. Caton, he is going to be closing ground. It's just a matter of how many of the horses he can pass.
Yeah, this guy's 5 for 23, but 0 for 6 this year. Coming off of a hard luck trip, I thought, in the ACAC, where he really had to chase throughout the 1 mile. He has had some success at the distance. Maintenance gallop here. He did work best of the morning, October 19th, and I believe he has a reputation for being a pretty good workhorse on the bridle. Nicely striding out here. Awesome Slew looks like he is training very nicely coming into the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile.
A couple of other horses that were out for a stroll earlier this morning that we will get a chance to take a look at as we continue to see Awesome Slew here in his gallop. Mind Your Biscuits has had some interesting training mornings here for Chad Summers, who we had a chance to talk to on the show the other day when this horse 2-minute licked. And again, not a workout today, but a spirited gallop to say the least.
Look, when you say 2-minute clip, they are open galloping, right? So they're traveling a mile in 2 minutes. That is a faster pace than what we're used to seeing. Good horses will gallop faster than some horses work. So when Mind Your Biscuits picks it up just a little bit, even in the midst of his 2-minute clip, it looks like a work to us, and they'll put the clock on him. He has another spirited gallop here. I don't know that he ever actually worked or blew out. I know Chad had said that he wouldn't work him if it wasn't the jockey on board, or at least that's what it sounded like, that the most he would be doing with an exercise rider on his back would be a 2-minute clip. Here, I like how this horse is coming into the race overall. Having watched him now over a period of time, he has had plenty of time to get to know Churchill Downs, to adjust to the surface, and very gentlemanly on the track. He trains like a good horse. We know he's a good horse. Now the question is whether he can be as good at the 1.25 miles against the best horses in the world as he has been at shorter distances.
Yeah, he just looks great. He's doing everything right. Chad Summers has followed a plan with Mind Your Biscuits, who's one of the best sprinters in the world, probably one of the best milers in the world as well. Now we'll find out if he's one of the best classic horses in the world. One of the best turf sprinters in North America is this gal, the veteran 6-year-old mare, Chanteline. And, she's feeling good as she's doing her thing out there.
Well, fillies have fared very well in the sprint when they faced the boys before they had their own division. So I'm wondering if in terms of sprinters on turf, the same could be true for Chanteline, 6-year-old coming off 2 straight wins, including the victory in the Buffalo Trace at Keeneland. She's a handful. You can see her rider there with very short irons, trying to get the jump on her as she really wants to do more. He has basically rocked back and is just trying to do everything he can to not have to change the hold of his hands, but at the same time keep her from getting too fast. And she is looking for every opportunity. If he were to falter ever so slightly, if he were to move his hands around at all. If he were to try to reach up and grab a shorter hold, she would most likely just take off like a shot. So it was a very nice job here, keeping her restrained and also keeping her happy as she maintains that fluid motion throughout.
Steve Asmussen won this race in 2011 with Regally Ready. We're talking about the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. And speaking of the turf, we're going to have several horses going out to the grass course a little bit later on this morning. Yesterday, we had one of the members of our team with a helmet cam and a microphone, and he was on a horse. Let's check it out.
So I'm on Liam the Charmer working a long half mile, and as you can see right there, I just touched into my watch. A lot of times I don't use a watch. It's about the feel of a horse and letting them get comfortable, and you should have a pretty good clock in your head. But being that it's the Breeders' Cup and we have strict instructions, exactly what the trainers want, what they're looking for to bring them into peak performance on Friday and Saturday, I don't mind having the watch as a backup just to make sure we're going the right pace. He had asked me to go off in about 25, and we did. It was a very comfortable work. Liam the Charmer is a very big horse, so he had some concerns that being that the grass isn't firm, a bigger horse sometimes won't get over it as well. But he did. He was very light on his feet. The horse next to me is Paved. Paved is a very talented horse. Down the stretch a little bit, she was leaning in, and you can see her kind of brushing me a couple times. 2 or 3 times we actually touched as she came over to me. Very fluid, nice, comfortable stride. We weren't looking for a fast work because he's running 1.5 miles, and Paved is running 1 3/8 miles. So it was more about making sure that they felt comfortable on the racing surface and that they got a feel of it to know what they expect the next time they're on it.
Great piece there. Aaron Greider on the back of a horse, Liam the Charmer, working in company yesterday, Kate. And I mean, what a great view, what great analysis as he kind of brings you into exactly what goes on here with the training of these horses.
Yeah, the GoPro gives you a perspective unlike any other for just about anything, but I think particularly for this, when you see what it's like to be able to look forward on the track and the whole vantage point of what the jockey has, that window of that world, it really is something. And I know some of the jocks did it before and they got covered with dirt, and you saw what they see when their goggles get covered with dirt.
I've never had that view. I mean,
I haven't either.
We'd like to welcome in Norman Cassie to the show. And Norm went on his own for the first time earlier this year after being instrumental in several Breeders' Cup winners over the years, World Approval, Classic Empire, Tepin, Catch a Glimpse for his father, Mark. And Norm, it's great to have you here, man. Exciting times.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. And, yeah, we're really excited to be here.
Belle Laura is the horse that you have in the Breeders' Cup this year. Just talk about your decision first, before we get to the Breeders' Cup, to go out on your own. You know, a lot has been talked about the timing of it, and obviously a Bellarmine University graduate here in Louisville with a business degree, but now you have your horsemanship degree as well, and the timing was obviously right for you.
You know, Joe, it was just a matter, and my wife Gabby hates when I say this. I had just got, you know, it sounds really bad, but I had just got bored in the position that I was in as assistant. Here I was training world-class horses, Tepin, Classic Empire, to name a few. But I felt like I had maxed out my capacity at that job, and it just had gone stale and stagnant on me. And I just think at that time it was pretty obvious what needed to be done, and there was never a right time to do it. It just felt like the time.
So I'm curious, because I've been told that you can spend years and years and years being an assistant trainer, but the moment that you are in there with your name on the program and everything is your responsibility, when you walk through the door as a trainer in your own right, everything changes. Did you experience that?
I don't, you know, as far as the way the horses are running and everything, I don't feel much different because we developed a program together. I took the program with me, and so the way that the horses are conditioned and trained, it's very much the same, and I'm very confident in the way that we bring horses over. So I feel good about that part. I'd say the biggest thing that makes me thing that I've noticed as far as on a personal standpoint is just the confidence that I have in myself now, because I went out and I did this, and now I'm putting my money where my mouth is, so to speak. And it just feel, I don't know the best way to describe it. I just feel like I'm maxing out my capacity or whatever. So it's just a different feeling.
We talked about the fact that you have a business degree, which is great in this business because you have to deal with owners. You have the Cassie name, which is a lot to live up to. Your dad's a multiple greatest stakes winner, a multiple Sovereign Award winner.
It's a Hall of Famer in Canada
Hall of
and
Fame.
probably
that
one
name
day
is,
here.
It's just synonymous with horse racing. Is that something that you feel like you have to live up to, and what's your relationship with your dad, and what discussions occurred before you decided to be Norman Cassie on the program?
We have a great relationship, and he understands. Basically, my dad has a legacy, and at the end of the day, I started doing this because I wanted to create a legacy on my own. Most people don't know this, but my mom's father was a horse trainer. He was at River Downs and places like that. He would never have got to experience what we're doing here today, actually. And then my grandfather was a breeder, owner, and trainer for Dad's dad was. So I've got a legacy to live up to, and at the end of the day, that's why I'm doing it, because I want to create my own thing. And it was hard to leave Dad, and I mean there was some. I think there was some animosity at first because he kind of took it a little personally, and I took it a little personally, and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's about family. That's the reason we're doing it, because I think Dad's created a really good legacy for himself, but if I go on to become something really special as well, that adds to his.
I want to talk about this filly, Belle Laura, and I'm curious, before she ran the huge race in the Jessamine, were you thinking that this might be a Breeders' Cup type horse?
Kate, I thought she was really good when we first got her. She was breezing really well, and she just showed she had all the qualities of being a talented horse. I didn't know how good she was going to be, but I thought she was going to be a good, like, allowance type horse. We ran her at Ellis, and she had a terrible post position that day. And I just said to Corey rode her first start, and I said, you know what, we're on the outside. Let's take her back and let's just see how she handles the turf, and we'll go from there. And he came back beaming like this is a serious racehorse. And after that, it was pretty obvious that we had something special there. And the thing about Belle Laura that I can't understand is how she broke her maiden here, because she was parked wide on both turns, and she was running really spotty throughout the entire race. In fact, if you go back and watch when she broke her maiden here at Churchill, it almost looks like she's going to finish last on the far turn because she's kind of losing interest. Julian picks her up again, and she manages to draw off, still running greenly. And actually, after she broke her maiden, that's when the light bulb really came on. And it's funny, her work before the Jessamine, I literally thought, wow, we're going to win the Jessamine. And then, of course, the draw came out, and we have another bad post position. All of our hopes of winning the race were really thrown out the door that day. But she ran respectable enough to be here, and truthfully, I wouldn't be surprised if she makes some noise.
Now, you've been competing against the highest level of competition since you went out on your own in Florida earlier this winter. 14 for 71 so far as a trainer, Norm. That's 20%. You've been winning in all categories. You seem to have a really nice knack with 2-year-olds. You seem to have a really nice knack with turf horses in particular, and you've been around some good ones. Do you kind of feel the same way?
Yeah, it's really easy because I've been lucky enough to be around these type of horses. So a lot of guys, they first start off, they probably don't have the experience that I have. I've been around these type of horses. I know what makes horses special. I know what it takes to make them compete at the highest level. And the biggest thing is you get to gauge them compared to what I've been around. And so I'm not going to compare Belle Laura to any of these horses that went on to do unbelievable things, but she definitely has the foundation, and she has the chance to become those things, and I truthfully believe that. And, my time with Dad is invaluable because I just got to experience stuff that has helped me get to this point.
And no doubt, having experienced that, particularly I think with the work that you did with Tepin and the places that she took you, and I know your dad has always credited your training with Tepin as much as anything for her success. Do you feel like that's prepared you for not just what you need to do with the horse from a trainer's perspective, but also what you need to do to just handle any outside pressures, any of the noise or excitement that gets generated around having a horse in a race like the Breeders' Cup?
You know, Caton, the funny thing is a lot of people, and we already touched base on why I left and did this on my own. Tepin's probably the main reason. I mean, my legacy and Dad's legacy and our family's legacy is one part of it, but I probably wouldn't have felt as confident or had the confidence to do it if I wasn't around Tepin, because Tepin kind of let us think, wow, you know, we're not just Canadian horse trainers. We're not just, we can be at the highest level. We can go over to England and win their most prestigious race. We can do anything we want to do. And so Tepin put that in me. And then as far as training goes, a lot of people are asking me if I'm nervous leading into this, and I'm not. You know, it sounds crazy, but I'm not nervous at all, because I've been around these type of horses. The horses Bellora's done everything she needs to do to be here. She's earned a right to be here, and I'm confident in what she's done. And that comes from experience.
Since you've gone out on your own, what do you feel has been the biggest surprise that you've encountered so far, and what do you feel you've been the most proud of up until this point? It's been 10 months. You were with your dad a lot longer, but now it's you.
I'm just proud of the way the horses are running. You just want the horses to run well and not embarrass you. And, we've had a few hiccups, but for the most part, I think all the horses are running well. I think we've spotted the horses in the right races, and I'm proud. I guess, Joe, probably the thing I'm most proud of is the success we've had in Kentucky, because Kentucky's my home, and Churchill Downs is my home, and it's my favorite racetrack. So to do really well here and to do really well at Keeneland, I'm very, very proud of. Thankfully, I was very well prepared. So there hasn't been many surprises. Everything we have encountered, we kind of expected, and that comes from the client standpoint to the financial standpoint to just running the business. And thankfully I had Dad. I have a lot of people that have taught me a lot of things, and so we were really well prepared when we came into this.
We saw the field for an instant. I'm curious, I know that you are an avid fan of the sport as much as you are a horse trainer too. Have you sussed out the competition? Do you have a line on who you think the horses to beat are, or
it's pretty obvious who we have to beat. I think it'll be a little more. We'll have a little more idea of what we got to do after tonight when the draw happens, because Chad Brown's horse, our filly, is very talented. But we've brought, and by we I mean me and Dad, have brought some very talented fillies into this same spot and had a bad post position, and all things were lost at the draw. So if Chad was unfortunate enough to have a bad post with this filly, I would say all bets are off with her. So I'd say we probably don't really need to figure out what we need to do or who we need to beat until the draw tonight, and then we'll start figuring out. It's obviously a very contentious race. It's a Breeders' Cup. We're going to have to bring our A game, and all we can really do is worry about Bellora.
Well, Norm, it's been great to have you here, and of course we're rooting for Bellora, and I'm sure you still are rooting for your dad's horses, because you have a connection to a lot of those as well.
It's actually really nice, Joe. They put us back in. I'm back in Barn 36 where it all started. We're getting to hang out this week and just seeing Dad's horses train today. They all look great, and I wouldn't be. I guess if you asked me who I thought would have his best shot, I really like Awesome Slew in the mile. He's just been a tough luck horse this year. He's run against some really good horses, but he likes Churchill in particular, and the one-turn mile is perfect for him. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's made some noise in the mile.
Best of luck. First of many Breeders' Cup starters. I'm sure Kentucky Derbies, Kentucky Oaks, all that good stuff is in your future, and this is just the beginning, man.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Norman Cassie, and lots of great promotions coming up over the course of the next few days, and a lot of them involve big bucks, including this one, Win with Eddie O. It's the $1 million sweepstakes. If Eddie O wins the Breeders' Cup betting challenge, you sign up and your name is picked, you get $1 million too. Let's find out more about it.
$500 yesterday. It looks like you made a trip to the ATM machine.
Hold on.
Negative £5.
Hold on a second. I'm hoping to turn that into that over the course of Derby Day. We got the next race coming up here, Lafitte. Behavioral Bias and McCracken. I'm going to box up to 6-8. McCracken wins. Behavioral Bias was second.
Eddie Olczyk, you have the winning exacta, guys?
I knew we'd make a comeback. Can't keep that so down.
I told you.
I get grief from Bailey. Lafitte every once in a while. Randy
I got your back.
Yeah, Randy, he does. You know what? I'm going to send up an old hockey stick, a wooden one. And either one of you guys get on the line today. Don't give me the accolades.
Nice to see the smile, Edzo. Now everybody wants to know who you like after knocking it out of the park in the last one.
Well, all of a sudden I got big shoulders. I like the 6-holes. I like Proctor's Ledge as well.
Proctor's Ledge to win.
I'm going to box the 5, 6, and 7. I don't think you can throw Justify out.
Justify has won the Kentucky Derby.
For me, I think it is all about Robert Bruce. Everything that I had in my pocket has been wagered on the 10 horse.
Robert Bruce has won the million.
Edzo likes Almanar in the upcoming Shadwell Turf Mile. Go to breederscup.com/Edio to enter now. Just enter for a chance to win $1 million. If Edio wins this year's Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, a lucky fan will win $1 million. Just enter at breederscup.com/Edio for a chance to win with Edzo.
It's the defining event of the horse racing season.
They're off in the Breeders' Cup Classic,
where the world's greatest thoroughbreds battle it out in the richest weekend in horse racing.
They're into the stretch.
At the Breeders' Cup World Championships.
Gun Runners on top of the world.
The Breeders' Cup this weekend on NBC and NBCSN.
Well, the action continues here, and standing by with Jeff Bloom, who is part of the crew for Midnight Bisou, the ownership group. And Jeff, talk a little bit about Midnight Bisou. She hit the track this morning, 4 furlongs and 49 out, 5 furlongs and 102 and change. What did you see about this work?
Yeah, it was a typical Steve Asmussen Monday prep before the race type easy half, but it was really the kind of work that gave you goosebumps. Her exercise rider, Angel Garcia, was just ecstatic about how well she went. You know, she was under wraps, just moving along really comfortably and cooled out before she got back to the barn. So if you could put something together for your last work going into a big race, that's what you would have wanted. You know, it was a textbook kind of easy half-mile breeze.
You've really liked her past couple of works, too, even last weekend. Do you have so much confidence going into the Breeders' Cup, judging by at least her last 2 works?
We really do. I mean, if anything, she's coming into the Breeders' Cup, I think, as good as she's ever come into any race. You know, she ran such a big one in the Cotillion. She had a nice little breather, if you will, from then until now, and so we're excited. We're pretty confident with how well she's doing, and just hopefully she gets a clean trip and we get to see what the result is.
And talk a little bit about the decision behind naming John Velasquez, Mike Smith aboard Abel Tasman going into the Breeders' Cup DISTAFF. He's ridden her pretty much her entire career. So, you know, there are probably plenty of options in order to find a rider, but what made you land on him?
Well, look, Johnny Velasquez clearly has proven he's, you know, one of the best jockeys in the history of the game. And you know, we knew all along that if it came down to Abel Tasman and Midnight Bisou being in the same race, that Mike was going to have to, you know, stay committed to the other filly. So, you know, we had waited a while because, of course, Midnight was Mike's horse if they could stay on her. And when Abel Tasman worked a couple weeks back at Santa Anita and Bob said he was coming, you know, we had, you know, Steve and I got together and just sort of explored what our options were. And Johnny just seemed to be a perfect fit. And we were excited to know that they really wanted a rider as well. So.
Talk about the 3-year-olds kind of going against the older filly and mares in the Breeders' Cup DISTAFF. I think it's, you know, one of the years where the 3-year-olds just, they've got some star power behind them this year.
It's been a really strong division this year, you know, more, I mean, of course I'm biased because I'm in it with Midnight, but it's really been a fun year. I mean, some really good 3-year-old fillies, and it's late in the season, so, you know, usually this is when you see some separation between the young horses competing against the older horses, and you know, there's there's a quality group of fillies and mares in this race, and I think Midnight in particular has been so mature in terms of her mental outlook on things and her physical that she's ready for it, but it's going to be a good race.
Well, you will not only be representing Midnight Bisou, but you also have two other Breeders' Cup contenders, one of them being Henley's Joy. How is he doing leading into the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf?
I'm going to say what you usually say, training really good, coming into the race great.
A cookie cutter.
Yeah, exactly. But it is true, we had a heartbreaking beat in the Bourbon over at Keeneland the other day, losing by a whisker, ran a winning race, and, he's only run the 3 times, and in each one of his races he's had to overcome some pretty significant adversity. So, real gutsy horse, and I was out watching his work, his final prep in the rain the other day, and it was, to me, one of his better workouts that he's had. So we come into this race really with no excuses, and we think he's as good as anything else out there, and hope he runs a big one. Sky Diamonds, too, will make her way into the starting gate for the Filly and Mare Sprint. That seems like such a deep, deep field, though. As per usual, what are your hopes with her leading into this weekend? Yeah, it's the Breeders' Cup World Championship, so it's supposed to be the best of the best. But, man, when you look at that Filly and Mare Sprint, you can make a case for every single one of them in there. One of the things is our filly ran such a big race in her last start in the LA Woman, and the way she won it, that was the answer we needed to come out here and give it a try again. I think the 7-furlong distance will suit us. It does seem like there's going to be some significant pace in there, which is good for us. And so this is her last hurrah. She's going over to the Fasig-Tipton sale the following day. So hopefully we go out in a big way in the Breeders' Cup with her. And she's got a tall order ahead of her, a tough task, but I think she's going to run a big one in there. I've always wondered, is that a little bittersweet to know that this is the swan song? Oh, of course it is. And she's been, what a ride Sky Diamonds has taken us on. It's just been such a wonderful experience. And so, of course it's bittersweet, but I'm glad that she gets to have her last dance for us in the Breeders' Cup. She earned the right with that last race, and it's nice for her that she's going to go on and get to have a fun time making babies. Jeff, thank you so much. You were out here bright and early. Go warm up. All right, thanks so much. All right, Joe, back to you.
Well, thanks, Gabby. The Europeans and a lot of the Americans still coming out on the racetrack as it is opened back up for training. And this is Azira coming out onto the track now. She is a participant, Caton, in the Filly and Mare Turf, and she's one of the international favorites.
Well, with good reason. She is a win machine. 2 for 3 this year, 6 for 11 lifetime. She won the Jules Blandford Stakes, a Group 2, yielding ground at the Curragh in her most recent start. And by Teofilo, she has a distinctive Dubai destination on the dam side. This is from the family and the barn of His Highness the Aga Khan stud, and they just have some classic pedigrees and some horses that have performed beautifully around the world, and this one is no exception.
She's 8-1 in the international markets, and Princess Yaiza is right behind her. She is a 3-year-old filly, Caton, who will be trying the Filly and Mare Turf against obviously some tough older mares. But she earned her spot with a victory last time out in France.
Gavin Cromwell trains her. Irish bred filly won last out on good soft ground in the Qatar Prix du Roi Loup. I'll get grief for the pronunciation of that, I'm quite
Better
certain.
you than me.
But it was at Longchamp, and she actually showed a little bit of early turn of foot out of the gate. She doesn't have to sit back and pounce. I thought that last was a very interesting race. I don't know that the competition was on par with what she's going to be facing in the Breeders' Cup, but she is very honest. If you look at her slate, she's got 11 wins, or 11 starts, 3 wins, 2 seconds, 4 thirds. She rarely runs a bad race.
The contest world has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger in horse racing over the course of the last several years. One of the biggest prizes is the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, which of course is coming up this weekend at the Breeders' Cup. Some chances to qualify in the coming days on horseplayers.com Wednesday and Thursday. Tournaments in the $200 range, $179 to be exact, $500 entry fee contest, and a $1,000 entry fee contest, all on Wednesday, October 31st at horseplayers.com. Full $10,000 BCBC seat for 65, 23, and 11 entries respectively, and those three contests. Then a $500 contest coming up on Thursday, November the 1st, one of the last chances to get into the BCBC. Again, all of these contests are at horseplayers.com. He was 6th in the National Handicapping Championship this past January, 12th in the Horse Player World Series, won the Saratoga contest a couple of years ago, and has been in the BCBC since 2010, a regular tournament player. And we're talking about Scott Carson. And Scott, this is an exciting time for jockeys, trainers, owners, bettors, horse players, contest players.
It's an incredible time, not only as a horse player, but just as a horse fan. Being here and coming to the Breeders' Cup, wherever it is part of the experience. So when you put up your 10,000, if you win your way in, great. But even if I don't win my way in, I always put up the 10,000, because this whole week is it's an incredible horse playing, horse person experience. And it's incredible. The weather today is amazing. I'm on a natural high just being here.
I know we're going to talk about specifically some horses that you're looking at for the Breeders' Cup and perhaps your strategy in approaching the BCBC. But before that, I'm curious about a little more about your philosophy of handicapping and kind of where you honed your craft, because obviously to get to this point and to be on a level of putting up the money to compete in tournaments like the BCBC is not something anyone does lightly. You have to have put in a lot of time, and there's a lot of skill and practice involved.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of pain, right? I've been playing since about 85, and I was a very casual player, but over time I kept on thinking I should be doing better, right? There's got to be a way to get onto the level of the best handicappers. So, I mean, the great thing about handicapping and being in contests is if you keep on doing it, you're going to get better, you know. But you also have to keep modifying your game. So if you're not winning, if you're not having any success for a year or two, you got to try something different. And personally, I use a lot of workouts, replays, and I use the Thorograph sheets. I use Brisnet, track bias information, and post position statistics. I use trainer patterns. Right now I'm having a good year, and hopefully it'll get better.
Well, full disclosure, Caton, you like to play tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
I like to play tournaments. A lot of different types of tournaments, whether it's the $2 win in place, a lot of different rules, and knowing the rules is very important going into the individual tournament to know what you need in order to be successful. Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, like so many of the tournaments nowadays, is a live money contest. You have to be as much of a good bettor, and probably more so than even being a good handicapper, and you got to have some guts.
You have to have guts, and the one thing that seems to be pretty consistent, people don't grind their way to the win in the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. They have one or two major opinions, and they kill it. So, like last year, Kevin McFarland, he put something like 4,000 or 10,000 on Talismanic, who won at 14-1. And then he had like a $1,500 exacta with Gunrunner on top of 3 other horses. So it was just a 1-2 punch, right? And he hadn't even played any races, which was a little controversial. He hadn't played any races until the turf. He waited to kill it. And the first Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge I was in, the guy who won it conserved his money and bet show bets so that he could bet 7,000 on Blame. And that won the whole contest.
I want to talk some of the specific horses that you're interested in, or perhaps focusing in on for the purposes of the contest, or maybe just for your own betting as well, starting with Thundersnow.
Thundersnow, now he's a really interesting long shot, and I can't say for sure whether I'm going to bet him. I still have to do some work on the
Well,
race.
and also would be revealing your strategy, which
Yeah.
we don't want to give too much away.
Oh, no, that's okay, because I'm wrong like 5 out of 6 times, and so if anyone tries to copy me, they're gonna get hurt 5 out of 6 times. Okay, so Thunder Snow. Now you see, Thunder Snow is coming up. He's third from the outside, third on the outside there. Right? He's just taking the lead, and it was an incredibly hot pace, and people think, oh, he should have won this race. But, in fact, he was still pretty close. Even though he was 9 lengths behind, it was a fast pace. And he just got nipped by Discreet Lover, who...
That's him on the track right now.
Wow. Oh, great. Is he out there right now?
Yes,
All
right behind us.
Fantastic.
That's live. He may even be going by us momentarily on this turn. So, in a sense, if I'm hearing right, you're saying while others may have looked at that and thought,
he should have won
bad
the race.
Should have won. You looked at it differently.
Yeah, because their plan the whole time was to have a turf race. After the Dubai World Cup, it was to have a turf race, which, he's not that good on turf, and then do the Jockey Club Gold Cup, and then target the Classic. So he almost won it, and he is 3 for 6 at the distance. So he's proven commodity. He's just not proven here at Churchill, and he had that weird Kentucky Derby here, but he was 3. He won the he won the Dubai World Cup, and his speed figures say that he's potentially primed to run the biggest race of his life.
This is Arthur Kitt, on the track for the Juvenile Turf as we continue our discussion with Scott. And, it's nice going in, Scott, and I'm sure you've had a lot of work that you've done already. Obviously, the Root and Riddle post position draw at 4 o'clock today will help you take that next step into visualizing how these races might play out. But you really do need to put a lot of work into it, maybe have some opinions that you're going to zero your wagers around, go into it with a plan, but then also have the ability to call audibles on the fly.
Yeah, and, there are some horses that I really like right now, and if they get the 14 hole, it's going to be hard to let go, but I may have to do that. In the case of Thunder Snow, I'm not sure that I'm going to send it in on him, but I'm kind of leaning that way.
There are a few other horses that I know you are at least looking at right now as potential plays. You may, again, make another call after the draw and everything else comes together, but talk about some of those others. Limousine Liberal, I know, is one who locally we've gotten to see a lot. He has a lot of experience for the sprint. Talk about him and what you're interested in with him.
Yeah, so he's something like 6 for 8 at the track, and he's having the best year of his career this year. And you see him on the inside here.
I bet him this day, by the way.
Okay, so now he came out to get some room, but then the hole kind of closes up, and he's like, he's doing this jig. And he never really got a chance. He didn't. It didn't seem like he officially lost momentum, but these are grade 1 animals. This is Whitmore and Promises Fulfilled. To be stymied like that in the stretch. When I saw it, I know I bet him also, and I was like, no, come on, get through, and he didn't get through. So, I think that between the combination of him loving this track and having the best year of his career, speed figure-wise, but then finally, that race, because he was stymied, I feel like he might still have some juice in reserve, whereas Whitmore and Promises Fulfilled were completely all out to do what they did, and Limousine Liberal, he didn't have a chance to overexert himself. So I think there's potential for him to have a breakthrough performance.
Well Defined is on the track right now for the Juvenile, and I'm curious, you seem as if trip handicapping is something that you incorporate into based on some of your observations on those horses that you were talking about, and you also talked about workouts and you using that information, incorporating that in. How much emphasis, if any, do you place on what's happening here and seeing and hearing and watching horses train in general, even beyond the workouts themselves?
I put a lot of emphasis on it. Just seeing 40 under on the show on Friday gave me the confidence to, I mean, that's a horse I'm telling you I'm playing. I mean, I love 40 under. He's going to be at 10 to 1 or so, and he's working out well. He looked good on the course. Seeing them here in person, whether it's on TV or in person, but in person even better, seeing them in the flesh and seeing like whether they're thriving, it really makes a difference.
40 under was the winner of the Pilgrim at Belmont, third week of September, and we've liked what we've seen from him. And not only that, obviously, Scott, he has proven to be able to handle less than firm turf, not only in his races, but in the training we've seen this week.
Yeah, right. He's kind of pranced over the course the other day, and aside from he's 2 for 2 on the turf, and we're going to see the whole race here, and this is really instructive. He's the 2 horse, right? Now you see that he's really close to the lead. That means he's got positional speed, right? So Manny Franco can get him out there to get good position. This is why I'm not so worried about post position with him. Then he drops back because the pace, starts getting a little hot. So he drops back. And, in his first turf race, he was near the lead the whole time. So this was a little change in style for him. Now he's being held back a little bit here.
He broke alertly, too, which is really big for a young horse to be able to break alertly, break cleanly. It helps you find that early position.
Yes, and, Good Magic was a perfect example of that. He always broke really well, and that's why when in the Triple Crown, he was always right there because he could get that position. Now, in this, these horses are going to kind of bunch up in front of 40 under, who's the 2 again, and he's going to get held up. And so just watch his momentum, right? He's going to have to wait. So he's kind of gotten stuck behind this wall. And he started getting some momentum, but now he's going to slow down, right? Because he can't go right now. He's got nowhere to go. And I like it when a horse can sort of encounter a little obstruction and then rally, turn it back on, and now he just runs down the winner.
Determined performance.
I mean, he runs down the leader.
Everything you like to see.
Yeah, and it's a small improvement on speed figures. And the other thing is that he's been working as good or better since that race, and he likes the course here. And his trainer won a Breeders' Cup race with a 2-year-old.
And there's some video of him on the track. He is a horse that has been impressing us physically, how he looks, how he appears, how he's training, how he breathes. All are real positive signals. So if that happens with any of the horses that you're signaling, that they get favorable post positions, they get good workouts, or they seem to be receiving some positives, does that then impact how much emphasis you place on those horses in the contest, or do you continue to stick to your guns as to the horses that you've mapped out in advance as the way you're going to play the whole series of races?
I think my strategy this year is going to be to really go deep on 2 or 3 horses. I loved Tourist 2 years ago, but it was the second to last race of the contest, right, of the day. The mile was like the second to last race. And I had lost most of my money. So I was down to about $1,000, and I bet it all on him, and I won $10,000. But that left me only $10,000 for the Classic, where I didn't have an opinion. So I think my strategy this year is to go deep on 2 or 3 key horses.
There's one more horse we want to take a look at, a horse that has really come into his own recently. We think about the Breeders' Cup Turf, and we think about the Europeans, and we think about Enable, obviously at the forefront. But Glorious Empire has really done well in recent starts. Good forward style. Maybe some of the turf courses he's been running over have favored speed a little bit and some of those slow paces, but there's no questioning how well this horse has run lately.
Yeah, he's 7 years old, and he's just now peaking out, right? He hasn't run really fast until he started his best race. He had one really good race at Saratoga last year, and then this year he had a good race at Delaware. So I've played him in his last 2 races, and in this race, which is the Sword Dancer,
he ran his first quarter in like 23, so it wasn't too slow of a pace. And then he was solid all the way around. And then when Channel Maker tried to catch him, he just could not catch him. And he's now had 2 months since that race. And to me, everything is beautiful about him. Channel Maker has since come back, and speed figure-wise, these two are like the fastest ones in the U.S.
Have you let yourself dream about what you would do with all the money if you actually won the contest in the CBC?
I just continue not to work because I'm temporarily. I'm temporarily. I had a business, I sold it. I'm kind of temporarily a professional handicapper, and it's a nice life.
I want you to tell all the racing fans out there that maybe feel a little bit intimidated about getting into a contest on a big stage like the Breeders' Cup, why they should consider it, because it just has to be your weekend. I mean, if you've got some skill, you've got a little bit of guts like we talked about earlier, anyone can do this. You just have to put yourself in position.
Yeah, I think so. And one reason why I started doing the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge is just so I could get used to betting a lot of money. Because, sometimes we have a great opinion, and we only have $10 to win on the horse, right? So you win at 20 to 1, you just won $200. And what if you had 1,000 or even 10,000? And so with the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, you're forced to bet a lot of money, and you have the potential to have a life-changing score, which if you don't get yourself in it, you're not going to have that potential. It's never going to happen.
It's a fascinating experience. I know my husband has competed in it. He is one of the players again this year, and especially to qualify for it, coming out of different types of handicapping contests can maybe not always prepare you for what the atmosphere is like when you do get to the situation of betting huge amounts of money in a real money tournament. Since you've played it for many years, can you just explain to everyone what the atmosphere is like there, and what maybe it is a benefit to have competed in it for a few years versus the first time you walk in there, but I'm quite sure that the excitement remains the same.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about it is these are really good players, right? After the first race on the first day, which isn't even a Breeders' Cup race, somebody's going to have $20,000, right? And these guys are good, and the women too. And the men, when I say guys, I mean men and women, and they're incredibly good handicappers. So it can be intimidating. That's why you just have to sort of stick to your opinion and don't let it fluster you. Like if somebody breaks out and gets 40,000 in the first couple of races, that's okay because you're going to win 60,000 like on the fourth race on the second day. If you've got a plan, right? So I mean, and obviously the plan has to come to fruition. You have to be right. But you have to give yourself that chance.
The Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge can be played live this year at Churchill Downs, Gulfstream, Monmouth, Santa Anita, plus TwinSpires.com, and HorsePlayers.com gives you final opportunities to qualify on Wednesday, 3 different tournaments at various price points, and on Thursday as well. And Scott, best of luck. A lot of camaraderie between all of these horse players. You're all going for the same goal, but you also make a lot of great relationships during the course of time as well because, you guys are all doing the same thing.
Yeah, not only that, hopefully you have friends who are good players because somebody is paying for dinner that night, right?
It's somebody who has a good day.
And if you have to pay for dinner, then you're really happy.
Then that means you had a good day, to be sure.
Exactly.
Good luck. We wish you well.
All right, thanks a lot, and thanks for having me.
All right, Scott Carson, everybody. Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge will be represented by players over the course of the next couple of days. Lots more on the racetrack, including some European stars going to the turf. We'll be back right after this.
Classic Empire! Roy H. in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Sam Marcos will win it. Rushing Bull has done it.
The WinStar Win program, it was a big, big day. finest breeding program in Central Kentucky.
The stars will align on November 4th when the top buyers from around the globe gather at Basing-Tipton for the world's premier breeding stock event. One spectacular evening with a catalog featuring no less than 70 graded stakes winners or producers, with nearly half of those being grade ones. Plus a stellar selection of Breeders' Cup winners, champions, and selected weanlings. No other sale packs as much energy and excitement into a single session. Join us for a night of stars, the November sale at Basing-Tipton. Where would you be?
It's the defining event of the horse racing season.
They're off in the Breeders' Cup Classic,
where the world's greatest thoroughbreds battle it out in the richest weekend in horse racing.
They're into the stretch.
At the Breeders' Cup World Championships.
Gun runners on top of the world.
The Breeders' Cup this weekend on NBC and NBCSN.
Turf action to come here on the Breeders' Cup Work Show. Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup. Joe Christopher alongside Kate and Bradar. We've seen a lot of good stuff so far. Still awaiting the appearance of Breeders' Cup turf champion from last year, Talismanic, but his horses head back out onto the racetrack. Lily's Candle is one that appears to be feeling pretty good out there.
Yeah, well, I think most of the Euros are pretty happy to just get out of the quarantine barn and get to be on the racetrack and do some training. But you can see her doing a little bit more. She's spinning, she's cutting a wheelie there, just very, very sharp in the brisk weather here. And remember, they've had probably at least a day or two off in terms of getting on the plane and transit, and so they're eager to get on and do something. Now, that was when she first got on the track. This is her now. Now she's minding her manners. She just felt good, and that's part of the reason they keep them in the chute, too, to be able to keep them a little bit more confined rather than out on the racetrack where there's a whole lot of trouble you can get into. Lily's Candle's owned by Marty Schwartz and is coming off a victory in Group 1 competition at Longchamp on Arc Day in the Qatar Prix Marcel Boussac, which is a very good race quality-wise. Big victory at a big price that day, and she's 3 for 5 lifetimes, so timing is everything for her.
Yeah, and she didn't have the greatest of trips either. She was at the back of the pack. She did encounter some traffic trouble. She switched out and closed with a flourish to get the job done. So an intriguing potential contender, to say the least. Polly Dream for the mile. This is a horse that is definitely worth considering as we see this Irish bred for the Breeders' Cup Mile. And again, mentioned this earlier that you think Breeders' Cup Mile, Caton, and you think Europeans, but the Americans have actually won 6 of the last 7 since Goldakova's 3 consecutive Breeders' Cup Miles, as we see Polly Dream here on the racetrack now. And this is actually the international favorite, 5-2. Speaking of Goldakova, Freddie Head sending over Polly Dream, one of the more highly regarded milers, particularly when she's on the top of her game.
Yeah, we heard Fanny speaking earlier about Freddie Head and the success he had with Goldakova. Certainly is still foremost in your memories as to Breeders' Cup moments. Polly Dream is 4 for 7 lifetime. This is a 3-year-old filly who put together back-to-back group wins at Longchamp and then Deauville. Her win at Deauville and the De Geest was, I thought, a hard-fought one. She kind of had to find a way out and bowled her way out and got up by half a length. But she's found a way to the winner's circle in 4 of 7 starts by Oasis Dream out of a Green Tune mare. Irish bred here for Wertheim and Frere. This is an interesting filly of the Euros. 3-year-old fillies, we would be thinking would be up against it, but in fact, they have had a pretty good success rate in the Breeders' Cup.
Yes, they have. The Black Album also pictured on your screen there, closest to us on your screen. Team Valor International and Gary Barber, formidable ownership combination there, coming off of a victory in a Group 3 at Longchamp. Again, you're getting to see a lot of these Europeans both on the main track and on the turf course, eventually here Caton as well. And obviously they are exiting the 42-hour quarantine period. All of the Europeans getting their first look at Churchill Downs here today, and it's been an absolute pleasure. We got to see Enable and Roaring Lion earlier, and Breeders' Cup Turf champion from last year, Talismanic, still awaiting his appearance, and he's supposed to go to the grass here this morning. So looking very forward to that. And it looks like Andre Fob's contenders will be going to the turf a little bit later on this morning as well.
I think that's 9:45 that they'll open up the turf course, and we'll maybe see a lot more activity than we've seen in days past. I think we've mostly seen maybe 2-3 horses at a time on there. I suspect because of the number of rivals, we'll see more, and that number will build over the coming days. But it's hard to gauge much about the European contenders based on what we see on the track, other than just whether they seem to be doing well. How did they handle the ship? Are they the fractious types? Do they get nervous? Do they seem rattled by new surroundings? So far, I haven't seen any of them that seem to be bothered in the least as they start to do a little bit of cantering, really, as opposed to actual galloping at this stage, just kind of out for a joyride, literally.
We talked about Andre Fob and him sending horses to the turf a little bit later. Waldgeist is one of them. Waldgeist 5-1 internationally, the second choice behind Enable in the international markets after running fourth behind Enable in the Arc de Triomphe, and it was a good performance, obviously, there. Beat Talismanic in the race prior in France, as we continue to see Europeans on the dirt track, again opening up the turf course about 9:45. And as reported earlier, Bob Baffert's brigade of Breeders' Cup horses expected to arrive tomorrow, Tuesday. And there's still quite a few horses that we haven't seen that we're going to be able to see for the first time in the coming days. I talked about the fact that these horses have to arrive here in order to be qualified, obviously, for the races moving forward. And it's Future Stars Friday on Friday, Caton, and Championship Saturday. We're getting closer and closer and closer. It's exciting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being able to focus on one type of horse, the 2-year-olds, on one day, and the idea of perhaps seeing some of the big stars in racing all on one stage, all on one day, and all those categories. I think this is a neat division of races versus some of the ways that we've split Friday and Saturday before. You never lack for excitement on both days and great racing, but I think this is kind of a natural way to have two race days that are very different but still the same in terms of the implications going forward. And it also has made for a unique coupling in terms of the races that can be paired in doubles, Breeders' Cup doubles that are truly daily doubles because they're encompassing 2 days. Races on day one on Future Stars Friday, like the Juvenile Turf, paired with the Turf as a daily double wager, and the Juvenile paired with the Classic, the Juvenile Fillies paired with the DISTAFF. I think the opportunities to bet those types of wagers, brand new this year for the Breeders' Cup, but really fascinating.
Most definitely. And again, welcome to all of you watching from all over the world, Facebook, Twitter, breederscup.com, all of us that are here live at Churchill, the benefit of being here on track, the WinStar Farm and the Fasig-Tipton Breakfast Marquee, breakfast at the Breeders' Cup, and the Root and Riddle post position draw again will be held at EquestriCon, the Kentucky Convention Center. That will be at 4 p.m. This afternoon. Hopefully, if you're not attending that live, you can watch that as well on breederscup.com as the anticipation continues to build.
So this foursome or trio of Breeders' Cup horses plus the pony are going to come around the bend and be right on the outside fence, I think, real close to where we're situated, which will be kind of neat. This will be the first time we've had opportunity to be on the air while they're training right next to us, because most of the time they're in the middle of the track and going a little bit faster. We're going to get a good look at him. Now, of course, it's not a weather shock that the California horses are going to experience when they get off the van. They've had autumn as well, and as a result, you'll see a lot of the Euros do have their winter coats, but if they don't, or if they've been clipped, you'll see those blankets, the half blankets that are underneath the saddle and covering the hindquarters.
Horses are actually getting closer and closer to us now. We are located, in case you're wondering, middle of the first turn.
There we are.
Can we wave? Can they see us?
They can't quite see us yet, but the other set in the foreground is the NBC set. We get a tent. NBC doesn't have a tent. I like that.
Yeah, nice and enclosed in here, and it's been a pleasure doing this show, obviously, and hopefully all of you out there are enjoying it as we bring you not only the Breeders' Cup works, the gallops, the horses arriving. Gabby got that with some great interviews over the course of the Breakfast at Breeders' Cup show as well. And, you know, we talked about the fact that the Root and Riddle draw is this afternoon at 4 o'clock, Kate. And, you know, it takes quite a long time to draw all of these races. But we've been looking at these pre-entry pass performances for the course of the last several days. Once the races are actually drawn and you can start to visualize what kind of trips these different horses might get, all the work that we've done so far just kind of takes it to the next level where you can kind of get a better idea of, okay, who's in which race now. We're not looking at past performances for 28 horses. We're looking at past performances for 10 or 12 or 14, and it kind of can really help us focus on the job at hand. And it's great. This draw's on Monday. The races are on Friday and Saturday. There's a lot of work to be done, but time to get it done.
There's still plenty of time for sure. And it does help you visualize how the race is going to unfold versus any number of horses that could be in or not in the race,
exactly.
Determining the pace as well as the style overall. I will say, I always, though, throw in a wager on that random horse that, in this case, it might be one of those that just walked by us, that you just have that chance encounter with. Maybe you run into the connections right when you're walking in the door, or in this case, we get to give a little wave to the riders, and they wave back as they come by. There's nothing quite like it. You can see the others have opted to take to the turf right now. I don't know if that quartet will, I think they're going to stick to the dirt, but these guys on the grass now getting a feel, and we will actually be able to see how the turf continues to progress as we had no rain. They're not going to be breezing, so they're not going to be cutting into it quite the same way, but still, when you're watching the horses travel over the turf, look to see how far their hooves appear to be sinking into the grass, and also whether they seem to be true in their stride or whether they seem to be struggling just a little bit. That can sometimes give you a hint as to whether or not the horses are handling the ground and how much give in the ground there actually is.
We have Queen of Bermuda for the Juvenile Turf Sprint and One Master for the mile. One Master is the horse that is in the back there. And there you see One Master.
For Lale Stables, of course, the owners of Barbaro. Filly is coming off consecutive victories. She won a Group 3 at Tipperary and came back in Group 1 competition at Longchamp and won by a nose. She never wins by much most of the time, but win is as good as anything. 4 for 8 lifetime, and a productive year last year as well. So even as the competition has gotten keener, as she's gotten older, she's stepped up to the plate.
Tough spot. Obviously, we've talked about some of the major contenders in the Breeders' Cup Mile for One Master. As we're seeing now the turf course opened up during the designated training period. You talked about the method of getting on the turf, Kate, and you have to have permission to get on the grass. Breeders' Cup horses, stakes horses, on a regular basis. We don't normally open up the grass course for gallops, for leg stretching type training. But this is a special time. It's Breeders' Cup. And we have East on the racetrack as well.
East is trained by Kevin Ryan, who has his yard at York. A lot of the other trainers we've seen from England are more toward, closer to London, basically, with their yards. But I actually had opportunity to visit his yard, Kevin Ryan's yard, several years ago, and it's so fascinating to see the differences in terms of how horses are trained. At that time, they had a synthetic gallop that they used in addition to other training areas, and the horses just would let loose almost in a straight line. It was incredible to see. East is coming off back-to-back wins. She's undefeated, and 2, she is by the champion Frankel. Lot of expectations for the offspring of Frankel, such a great horse in his own right, and so far she hasn't disappointed.
And Frankel hasn't disappointed as a stallion either. East, as you mentioned, a perfect 2 for 2. We don't know how good she is. She took up a huge step forward in her second career start. And one of the things that you really have to like about her, Caton, is the fact that she's handled soft ground, defeating 9 rivals, and then she came back and handled firm ground in her follow-up race and was superiorly impressive. She only beat 4 horses that particular day, but she did so in stylish fashion, and she's making a nice appearance here. You talk about that European look. She certainly seems to have that as we get a look at this Kevin Ryan trainee on the grass course here at Churchill Downs. Still awaiting the appearance of Talismanic, the Breeders' Cup turf upsetter from last year, the turf champion. He won that race at Del Mar, and Talismanic has been pretty highly well publicized. He really wants firm ground if he can get it, like he got in Southern California last year. It looks like there'll be a little bit of giving the ground for Breeders' Cup weekend here at Churchill, as there is some rain in the forecast for both Wednesday and Thursday, although the forecast looks pretty good for Friday and Saturday, and Mother Nature could change her direction at the drop of a hat, so we'll have to keep a close eye on the forecast, but that's what we're looking at least at this point, moving through the weekend into the weekend.
Now, at home, the Euros will go out in big sets, so here in North America, they try to simulate that as much as possible, and you'll see 2s, 3s, and even 4s going out with one pony at the same time, just to try to embrace the same style that they use at home, which is just to have company versus individual. Another difference here, where rarely do we see seasoned race horses galloping in company. Most of the time, the thought is that they would get too keen or too competitive, and the only time you see that is if a horse is really needing company and has trouble focusing or seems confused, or if you're really trying to get more out of them, to get them more aggressive, you might put them in company. You see that in the workouts more frequently, but just training, you don't see it as often. But a horse who's had company all the time, Quarteto de Cordas from Brazil, where also I think they usually have a companion or a lead. Sometimes it's a lead horse, too, and it's almost followed the leader around the racetrack.
This horse is going to work. Brandon Stauble, who is a member of our Players Show team, and our resident clocker, reporting that Quarteto de Cordas will work here, apparently in company on the inside for trainer Ian Wilkes. And again, this will be this horse's first start in North America. We've gotten a chance to see him the last few days, Caton. Kind of mixed opinions. We'll see how he does in the work. This is, I believe, pretty important for his stature moving forward into a really tough race like the turf. This horse earned his way into the Breeders' Cup Turf via a Breeders' Cup Challenge race, and we've seen the Breeders' Cup Challenge race series Caton go international, not only to Europe but to South America, and it's nice to see this horse representing South America.
He actually, I thought that was a very solid work. Stayed with his workmate. The workmate worked very well. I'd like to know who that one is, right?
Get a bet on that one.
We could get a name and find out when that one runs next. But I thought I'm seeing some improvement and progression just as far as energy level and the way he finished here. I thought this was a very solid move forward.
Yeah, I mean, we weren't impressed at all by the way the horse was moving on the dirt the last couple of days, but we've talked about this too, Caton, and knowing the horse, some turf horses don't get over the dirt all that well. Some are like, wow, you know, they handle the dirt pretty well. Quartetto de Cordas obviously handled the turf just fine here this morning, and a couple of the Euros picking it up a bit on the grass course, stretching their legs.
And that's the single file that I told you about, that you'll see them often travel like that when they're training at home as well. It'd be a little bit different scenery usually in their yards, I would imagine, more a forest or a field versus an actual race course with barns in the back. That's one master in the front. And size is striking there. You can tell, let's see, 914. Queen of Bermuda.
I believe that is, yes.
More diminutive filly, but I like how she skips over the ground. I think that the camps surrounding the horses have as much fun with these adventures overseas, the opportunity to travel with their horses all over. Most of the time, the team that is in place with the horses is the traveling team. It can include an assistant trainer or foreman, as well as an exercise rider and a groom. There they call them lads versus grooms. And the team will travel all over the world with the same group of horses. And so for Mendelssohn, for example, that team has been intact since Kentucky Derby time. And going forward, they don't spend a lot of time in any one space, but boy, they've seen some places and experienced some tremendous racing thrills.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be said for that experience and going different places and learning the different quirks of the different race courses worldwide. The globe has definitely shrunk when it comes to horse racing. When you talk about events like the Dubai World Cup, obviously the Pegasus World Cup as well, the Breeders' Cup, Hong Kong. I mean, Chad Summers talked to us on the show the other day about, you know, his Breeders' Cup contender, and the fact that although the horse has been a sprinter most of his career and is now stretching out to the classic distance of 1.25 miles, and mind your biscuits, that he's always thought in the back of his mind that maybe he would like to try turf with this horse. And there's an outside possibility that after the classic, they might go to Hong Kong and try the grass. So you see trainers like Wesley Ward and Ken McPeak, and even this year, Tim Glyshaw, sending horses over to Royal Ascot as well. So the globe has definitely shrunk quite a bit as far as horse racing goes, and it just makes it nice to be able to see all the best horses in the world kind of intersect at some point. It
really does, and it was certainly foremost on the minds of the Breeders' Cup creators when they sat down to come up with a concept of rewarding and recognizing and encouraging those who are the creators of the horses in the first place, the breeders, but also of putting racing on a world stage via television, and that network presence and the attraction of horses coming from other places and opportunity to see horses that we never get to see otherwise. You know, overseas, it's very common. Most of the horses that compete in Dubai, those teams of people, those trainers, they compete all over the world. They don't think it's unusual to travel to Europe, to travel to the Middle East, to travel to Hong Kong and the United States. But for us, it's much more of a rarity. It is becoming more commonplace, and I really think the Breeders' Cup has a lot to do with that. That kind of triggered the notion and brought people together.
Yeah, and we talked about this earlier, as far as within the last couple of days, about not only dirt racing being so prominent here in the United States, because that's what we race on primarily. That's when you look at the most prominent races in our game: Kentucky Derby, Preakness, Belmont, Triple Crown, Breeders' Cup Classic, Pegasus World Cup. But also turf is becoming bigger and bigger for us, and our grass horses are becoming better and better, and we're able to go over and compete with some of the better grass horses in the world. It looks like this is going to be the last wave of Europeans. We are expecting Talismanic. We are also expecting the likely second choice in the Breeders' Cup Turf as well from Andre Bobsbarn, as we take a look at some of these horses stepping out there. Expedite in the mile is the one that we're taking a look at now. Still hoping to see Talismanic and Waldgeist, two horses that are on our schedule as far as what we're hoping to see and what we're expecting to see here this morning.
Expedite comes from the Michael Stout yard for Juddmonte Farms. He's a 3-year-old colt by Exclamation who'll be running in the Breeders' Cup Mile. Has won 4 of 9 starts lifetime, and his last win came at York in the 7-furlong City of York Stakes. He was the favorite that day. He came back and finished 3rd at Longchamp in Group 1 Company, was beaten about a length and a quarter for all of it.
He's 5-1, Caton. The Euro books, the early odds from the bookmakers, they're 5-1. Sir Michael Stout has won 7 Breeders' Cup races. Surprisingly, has never won a Breeders' Cup Mile. The only American that's really being given a chance in the Breeders' Cup Mile, at least on the international book market, is Oscar Performance, who won last time out, obviously at Woodbine, and a former Breeders' Cup champion in his own right. But Expert Eye is a horse that a lot of people are talking about, again, 5-1 on the international markets.
And also out with him is Mustachri for Sir Michael Stout, along with his stablemate. He's a 5-year-old gelding, 7 for 15 lifetime, and Shadwell Stable owns him. He rides a 2-race win streak in back-to-back Group 2 races on good ground and good firm ground. Mustachri, I thought was intriguing. I like his consistency. Any horse that can win half of his starts racing at the level that he's racing at, it has to be considered as a possible contender. He doesn't have the name because he's been competing primarily in Group 2 and Group 3 stakes, but that's not to say you just don't know if he's capable until he gets a chance to show it. And he doesn't know that he's only beaten Group 2 and Group 3.
Right, and he's getting some respect on the international markets at 14-1. You hear 14-1, but you know what? I mean, this is going to be a full field of horses, and no real defined favorite necessarily in this particular race on the international market. So Polydream, who we saw earlier, Freddie Head, 5-2 on the international markets, but a lot of horses in that 5, 6, 8, 10, 12-1 range, and Talismanic was in that range of square price horses last year. He won the Breeders' Cup Turf. He's looking to do it in back-to-back years, and there's that familiar Big White Blaze. This horse, very photogenic, has quite the fan club, and we're getting our first look at him right now.
First look this year. Last year, we had a good look at him as he stormed to victory.
So did everybody else in the race.
He is not quite as big as some of the other horses, but that big white face is easy to spot. He's a little bigger than the horse he walked onto the turf with, though. I'll say that.
That's Waldgeist, who's one of the favorites in the turf.
I think he looks maybe it's because he won last year that he looks a bit more regal, or just has a more confident way of walking onto the course than I recall from last year. And Waldgeist, there's a look at him, is another one that everyone is very eager to see. off of his last performance. Though he was fourth, he was beaten just a length and 3/4 by Enable, and he ran a heck of a race in the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe, and before that had put together a string of 4 consecutive wins.
For more on the ARC and the Andre Fabre contenders, Wildgeist and Talismanic for the Breeders' Cup Turf, let's send it back to Gabby and Fanny.
Thank you, Joe. And standing next to Fanny. And Fanny, you were mentioning earlier that Andre Fabre would not normally train his horses on the turf. So what insight could you give us as to why we're seeing them out on the turf today?
Well, after speaking at people at the quarantine, and actually the staff from Andre Fabre, they thought that they would actually go on the dirt at that time of the day. Unfortunately, the dirt is closed, and there was a technical issue with the timing. They were to go out with other Godolphin horses who flew in a little bit later, and they technically could not clear quarantine in time for them to all go out together and be able to go on the dirt. So that's why it's a rare occurrence of Andre Fabre horses, although they will run on turf, they usually don't train on turf.
Exactly. So it's just pretty much due to the fact that they didn't clear quarantine in time to train on the dirt. So that's why we see them on the turf today. We can expect them to probably hit the dirt tomorrow.
That's usually what they've been doing for years, yes.
And talk a bit about Talismanic, as we can kind of see him on the turf right now. And how you think that he is coming into this year's Breeders' Cup Turf versus last year, and how you think the turf conditions may hurt or help him.
Well, he's done so well on good ground, firm ground. Obviously, in Del Mar, he absolutely loved it, but that was, rolling fast, and that's not what he's going to find here. He won a good race in Deauville in the summer, and he's run well. His only disappointing run was in the Arc. I just saw him walking onto the track. He's made a bit of a winter coat, and I don't want to judge too early the horses when we see them on their first day out, because the trip can take a bit out of them, and you need to give them a couple of days and see how they evolve over a couple of days. But he's one of these horses that is just such a crowd favorite, and he can, when he's doing really well, he'll show you. He did last year, actually. I was happy to be on his band and believing in him that he could win the Breeders' Cup Turf. So I hope that on Saturday I'll be as confident as I was a year ago.
And obviously the softer conditions, as we're expecting some rain midweek leading into Breeders' Cup weekend, could maybe hurt him a bit, but that might not hurt Wildgeist, who is training on the turf with him here today. And he kind of looks like a horse that's really picked things up in his 4-year-old campaign.
He is the up-and-coming horse in France, older horse. In France, he's won the Grand Prix de Saint-Cloud. He's done really well. He actually beat Talismanic in his Arc prep, and I think we need to throw away the Arc. He didn't have the best of trip, and of course, he was running against champions. Can he beat Enable again? I'm not sure if Enable is at her best, but he's probably the best horse that we have in training in France right now.
There's been a lot of talk about the Arc to the Breeders' Cup and how unsuccessful that has been for winners in the past. I know there's a lot of talk about it. I see you sighing here next to me since nobody can see us here. But what are your thoughts on that and your insight on that?
Well, I think you have to consider the Arc winners who actually came here. They have not been that many. And sometimes when they came as an afterthought after the Arc. When you look at horses who ran well in the Arc and have actually come, then they do. The Arc is a good prep race, if you can say so, or sets you well to continue on and win the Breeders' Cup Turf. And again, Enable has had a completely different campaign this year because she couldn't race. She was injured. So she's a really, really fresh horse. I actually had a chance to talk to her exercise rider, Imran, who said that she has been doing better. She has improved since the Arc, that she's a really happy horse, that she traveled really well, and that she's focused. So you don't see too much of the eagerness that she could have shown in the past, but she is focused and she wants to go, and physically, mentally, she's improved. He seems really bullish about his chances.
Oh, definitely a race to look out for sure. The Arc, not only Enable, but obviously Talismanic and Wildgeist both exiting that particular race as well. well. With Talismanic, do you think that in terms of configuration, I mean, because by nature of the fact that the Breeders' Cup switches venues every year, how do you think that Talismanic and Wild Geist will take to this configuration in kind of the tighter turns? I mean, not quite as tight as Del Mar, but this configuration here at Del Mar on the turf.
I know Talismanic will like the tighter turns. The ground will be the issue if it rains too much. I think Wild Geist will not mind at all the softer ground, so I'm not worried about that. And I know Enable will love it no matter what the ground is.
And I want to ask you one last question before we throw it back to the guys on set. Lily's Candle, this was the first day that I've ever seen her, and she was very excitable. She felt very sharp. But tell us a little bit more about this filly. She looks like a little Spitfire.
Well, she's very French. She's a sassy little French filly, and she was jumping up and down on her way to the track, just wanting to, draw a little bit of attention. Actually, we spoke to some people at the quarantine, and she ate her temperature chart. That's the kind of filly she is, but she's tough. She's tough as nails. She won the French Guineas. She won the Prix Marcel Boussac in very impressive fashion. She wasn't worried or fazed by the trip whatsoever. I mean, she's a tiny little baby. She's a 2-year-old, and usually by French standards, we say we keep them in cotton. They're so protected. And yes, she acted up. I think she wanted to get attention more than she was worried. And no, you'll see, she has pizzazz. I think that's how you say it.
Definitely more of a feel-good type of energy than anything negative, I would say. Definitely positive in terms of how she looked on the track. But guys, as Talismanic and the rest of the European crew are still on the turf, we'd love to get more of your insight.
Well, thanks, Gabby, as Caton's actually...
I'm taking a picture. Talismanic's walking right behind us.
As they gallop by, the very photogenic fan favorite, Talismanic, with that gorgeous white blaze, very identifiable as they just passed us by on the set. And we got to see a lot of cool stuff today, highlighted obviously came by the Europeans and Abel, Roaring Lion, Waldgeist, as well as Talismanic, and the hits just keep on coming.
And will continue. Fanny making a fascinating and a really valid point about the circumstances that surrounded ARC winners in the past, but the ARC as a whole, as a race leading to the Breeders' Cup. And I think that is important to keep in mind, that circumstances can vary considerably from year to year as to how a horse was prepared prior to a victory, even the circumstances surrounding the race in and of itself. For example, last year's Arc de Triomphe wasn't even held at the same course that this year's Arc de Triomphe was held over, and arguably a less demanding course. It just depends on the circumstances of the individual horse, whether or not they're going to be able to parlay a victory there to a victory here. But the argument is that it is such a tough race. It would be like saying, can you take the Kentucky Derby and follow it up with a win in the Preakness Stakes? The majority of the time, you can't, because of the circumstances surrounding it. But every once in a while,